The Deal by Elle Kennedy. Chapter 1. In the first chapter of The Deal, Elle Kennedy introduces us to Hannah Wells, a sharp-witted and academically gifted music major who prefers to stay in the background of campus life. The story opens by establishing Hannah's hidden strength. While most of her classmates are struggling to survive a grueling ethics course taught by a notoriously difficult professor, Hannah has managed to achieve the impossible by earning an A on the midterm. This academic success serves as the catalyst for the entire plot, as it catches the attention of Garrett Graham, the star captain of Briar University's hockey team. Garrett is the quintessential campus celebrity, handsome, athletic, and brimming with confidence. But he is currently facing a crisis that his charm cannot fix. His future in professional hockey is jeopardized because his GPA has plummeted, and if he cannot pass this ethics class, he will be kicked off the team and lose his shot at the NHL. The narrative highlights the stark contrast between their worlds when Garrett tracks Hannah down at a local diner where she works. Garrett arrives with his usual swagger, fully expecting that a few smiles and a bit of his trademark flirtation will be enough to convince Hannah to tutor him. However, he quickly realizes that Hannah is entirely unimpressed by his status as a hockey god. Unlike most girls on campus who would jump at the chance to spend time with him, Hannah sees right through his bravado and finds him entitled and annoying. She values her time and her peace of mind, and she has no desire to babysit a jock who didn't bother to study. Her refusal is firm, leaving Garrett stunned because he isn't used to hearing the word no, especially from someone he initially underestimated. Interwoven with this academic conflict is a glimpse into Hannah's internal world and her social aspirations. She harbors a deep, quiet crush on a football player named Justin Cole, but she feels incapable of acting on it. This hesitation is rooted in a traumatic past that has left her wary of physical intimacy and vulnerable in social situations involving the opposite sex. While she is bold and confident in a classroom setting, she feels like an outsider in the world of college dating. Kennedy uses this chapter to set the stakes. Garrett needs Hannah to save his career, while Hannah needs a way to break out of her shell and catch the eye of the boy she likes. By the end of the chapter, the tension between Hannah's independence and Garrett's desperation is palpable, laying the groundwork for the unconventional arrangement that will eventually bridge the gap between the music department and the hockey rink. The Deal by Elle Kennedy. Chapter 2. Chapter 2 of The Deal dives deeper into the persistent, almost relentless nature of Garrett Graham, as he realizes that Hannah Wells is not just his best shot at passing ethics. She is his only shot. The chapter opens with Garrett still reeling from the unexpected rejection he faced at the diner. He is used to a world where his status as the star hockey captain opens every door and wins over every girl, so Hannah's blunt refusal to tutor him has bruised his ego and heightened his desperation. Garrett is under immense pressure. His father, a former pro-hockey legend with a volatile personality, looms over his life, and the threat of losing his spot on the team is not just about a game. It's about his entire future and his one escape from his father's shadow. This internal pressure drives him to track Hannah down again, this time in the more neutral but equally public setting of the university library, where he hopes to wear down her defenses with a mix of logic and his trademark persistence. As the scene shifts to the library, we see the stark contrast in their work ethics and social standings. Hannah is tucked away, fully immersed in her studies and content in her solitude, while Garrett approaches her with the confidence of someone who refuses to take no for an answer. The dialogue between them in this chapter is sharp and fast-paced, showcasing the immediate chemistry and enemies-to-lovers tension that defines their relationship. Garrett tries several different angles to convince her. He offers money, He tries to appeal to her sense of charity, and he even attempts to use his physical presence to charm her. However, Hannah remains remarkably steadfast. She isn't just being difficult for the sake of it. She genuinely values her time and doesn't want to be associated with the puck bunny culture that follows the hockey team. She views Garrett as a distraction she simply cannot afford, especially given her own internal struggles with her past trauma and her desire to remain invisible to the campus elite. The chapter further explores Hannah's character by highlighting her observation skills. While she finds Garrett annoying, she is also smart enough to notice that he isn't actually stupid. She recognizes that he is bright, but simply hasn't applied himself to the specific, dense philosophical concepts of the ethics course. This realization adds a layer of complexity to their dynamic. It isn't a case of a genius helping a fool, but rather two capable people at an impasse. Meanwhile, Garrett begins to observe Hannah more closely as well. He notices that she isn't just a nerd, but someone with a dry wit and a backbone of steel, which actually earns his grudging respect. Despite his frustration, he finds himself intrigued by the fact that she doesn't fawn over him. The climax of the chapter centers on Garrett's discovery of Hannah's Achilles heel, her massive, unrequited crush on the football player Justin Cole. Garrett spends a good portion of the chapter observing how Hannah looks at Justin and how she becomes flustered and invisible whenever he is around. This is where the deal begins to take shape in Garrett's mind. He realizes that while Hannah doesn't want his money or his fame, she does want social confidence and a way to get Justin's attention. Garrett, being a social strategist and a high-profile athlete, knows exactly how to manipulate the campus social hierarchy. He begins to formulate a plan where he can use his own popularity to boost Hannah's status, making her seem desirable to Justin by association. The chapter concludes with Garrett still in pursuit, but now he has a specific leverage point. He isn't just asking for a tutor anymore. He is preparing to offer a trade that Hannah might actually find impossible to refuse, setting the stage for the formal proposal of the fake dating for tutoring arrangement that follows. The Deal by Elle Kennedy. Chapter 3. In Chapter 3 of The Deal, the persistent tug-of-war between Hannah Wells and Garrett Graham finally reaches a breaking point, transitioning from a one-sided pursuit into the formal negotiation that gives the book its title. The chapter opens with Garrett continuing his relentless campaign to recruit Hannah as his tutor. He has realized that typical bribery, money, popularity, or charm isn't working on her because she operates on a completely different social and moral frequency than the typical students he encounters. Garrett is forced to abandon his big man on campus persona and actually use his brain to analyze what Hannah truly needs. He observes her interactions in the student union and notices how she practically turns invisible when her crush, the football player Justin Cole, walks into the room. Garrett sees the longing and the debilitating lack of confidence in her eyes, and he realizes that while Hannah is a genius in ethics, she is failing miserably at the game of college attraction. Garrett corners Hannah once again, but this time his approach is tactical rather than arrogant. He proposes a mutually beneficial arrangement. If she agrees to tutor him so he can pass his ethics exam and maintain his hockey eligibility, he will help her get Justin's attention. He explains the law of the jungle on campus, suggesting that if a high-profile athlete like himself is seen pursuing her, it will instantly raise her social stock and make Justin wonder what he's missing. Essentially, he offers to fake date her to make her the most desirable girl in the room. Hannah is initially repulsed by the idea, finding it shallow, manipulative, and exactly the kind of jock logic she detests. She mocks the idea that she needs a man to validate her worth. Yet as the conversation progresses, Garrett's logic begins to chip away at her defenses. He points out that Justin doesn't even know she exists, and his plan is a shortcut to getting the results she wants without the months of agonizing from the sidelines. The internal conflict for Hannah in this chapter is profound. She is a survivor of a traumatic past, and the idea of being on display with someone as loud and public as Garrett Graham is terrifying. However, she is also tired of being the girl who hides in the music halls, and she genuinely wants to move forward with her life and experience a normal relationship. Garrett, sensing her hesitation, softens his approach. He shows a flash of his own vulnerability, admitting how much hockey means to him and how his entire future and his sanity regarding his overbearing father rests on this one grade. This moment of genuine honesty is what finally bridges the gap. Hannah sees that beneath the cocky exterior, Garrett is just as desperate as she is, albeit for different reasons. The chapter culminates in the official striking of the deal. Hannah sets very strict boundaries. The tutoring sessions must be productive, the dates must be believable but respectful, and there is to be no actual physical intimacy. Garrett agrees to everything with a smirk, confident that he can handle the workload and the charade. This chapter is pivotal because it shifts the power dynamic from Garrett chasing Hannah to the two of them becoming reluctant allies. By the end of the chapter, the contract is mentally signed, and the reader can feel the shift in the air. They are no longer just a jock and a nerd, but a team working toward two very different goals that require them to spend an enormous amount of time in each other's personal space. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 4. In Chapter 4 of The Deal, the theoretical agreement between Hannah Wells and Garrett Graham finally moves into the realm of reality as they hold their first official tutoring session. This chapter is significant because it marks the first time these two characters are forced into a quiet, private setting, Garrett's house, away from the prying eyes of the campus and the chaotic energy of the locker room or the diner. The change in environment shifts the power dynamic. While Garrett is the king of the ice rink, he is clearly out of his element in the world of academic theory, and Hannah, armed with her textbooks and a no-nonsense attitude, takes full command of the situation. The chapter begins with Hannah arriving at the massive house Garrett shares with several of his hockey teammates. The setting itself provides a wealth of character development. Hannah is immediately struck by the testosterone-heavy atmosphere, filled with sports gear, loud noises, and the general clutter of elite college athletes. However, Garrett steers her away from the chaos to a quiet space where they can actually focus. Despite his reputation for being a playboy, Garrett shows a surprising amount of respect for Hannah's boundaries in this chapter. He is genuinely stressed about his ethics grade, and his desperation to remain eligible for the hockey season overrides his usual impulse to flirt. As the tutoring begins, the intellectual friction between them is palpable. Hannah is a demanding teacher, refusing to let Garrett slide by with easy answers or half-hearted efforts. She challenges his worldview, pushing him to engage with complex moral philosophies that he initially finds boring or irrelevant. To her surprise, Garrett isn't the dumb jock stereotype she expected. He is quick-witted and capable of deep thought, but he has simply never had someone hold him to a high academic standard without being intimidated by his status. This intellectual sparring creates a new kind of chemistry, one based on mutual respect rather than just physical attraction. Garrett, in turn, is fascinated by Hannah's passion for music and her sharp mind, realizing that her nerdy exterior hides a vibrant and fierce personality. However, the chapter isn't just about textbooks. Kennedy uses this session to weave in more personal elements. As they talk, the wall between them starts to crumble. Garrett begins to see that Hannah isn't just helping him because of the deal to get Justin's attention. She genuinely cares about the subject matter, and perhaps, despite herself, wants to see him succeed. There are moments of levity and banter that soften the tension, showing that they actually enjoy each other's company more than they are willing to admit. Garrett starts to realize that fake dating Hannah might not be the chore he thought it would be, and Hannah begins to see the human being behind the Graham jersey. The chapter concludes with a sense of accomplishment, but also a growing underlying tension. While they have successfully navigated their first lesson, the physical proximity and the shared goal have sparked a flicker of genuine interest that wasn't there before. They have established a rhythm, but both are acutely aware that their deal is built on a foundation of deception regarding their social lives. As Hannah leaves the house, the readers are left with the feeling that the lines between their fake arrangement and their real feelings are already starting to blur, even if neither is ready to acknowledge it yet. The Deal by Elle Kennedy. Chapter 5. In Chapter 5 of The Deal, the theoretical bargain between Hannah Wells and Garrett Graham finally enters the public eye, shifting from the quiet confines of tutoring sessions to the high-stakes social arena of a Briar University hockey party. This chapter is a crucial turning point because it marks the first time they must perform their fake relationship in front of an audience, and the results are both physically charged and socially explosive. The chapter begins with the internal preparation for the event. Hannah is understandably nervous as she is stepping directly into the lion's den, a house filled with elite athletes, puck bunnies, and the very person she is trying to impress, Justin Cole. Garrett, ever the strategist, takes charge of her transformation, not by changing who she is, but by ensuring she is seen by his side, which he knows is the ultimate social currency on campus. When they arrive at the party, the atmosphere is electric and overwhelming for Hannah. The sensory details, the loud music, the smell of beer, and the crush of bodies heighten her anxiety, particularly given her history of trauma in crowded, alcohol-fueled settings. However, Garrett steps up in a way that surprised even Hannah. He isn't just using her for a grade. He becomes a protective, attentive boyfriend. He keeps a hand on the smalls of her back, leans in close to whisper in her ear, and ensures she feels safe and included. This physical proximity, while part of the act, begins to feel dangerously real for both of them. Garrett's teammates are stunned to see their captain, who usually cycles through casual flings, appearing so devoted to a girl they don't recognize. This immediate shock factor is exactly what Garrett promised, and it works flawlessly. The climax of the chapter occurs when they finally cross paths with Justin Cole. Garrett puts the deal into high gear, dialing up the charm and the public displays of affection. He treats Hannah with a level of reverence and desire that makes everyone in the room take notice. For the first time, Justin actually looks at Hannah, really looks at her, not as a background character in a lecture hall, but as a woman who has captured the attention of the most popular guy at Briar. The plan is working perfectly. Justin is visibly intrigued and perhaps a little bit jealous. However, the unexpected consequence of this ruse is the genuine chemistry that flares up between Hannah and Garrett. During a moment where they are forced to be close to sell the lie, the banter turns softer, and the touches linger longer than necessary. As the party progresses, the chapter explores the mask Garrett wears. While he is performing for the crowd, there are quiet moments where he checks in on Hannah's comfort level, showing a side of himself that is far more empathetic than his arrogant jock persona suggests. Hannah, in turn, finds herself navigating a minefield of emotions. She is getting exactly what she wanted, Justin's attention, but she finds herself increasingly distracted by Garrett's scent, his laugh, and the way he makes her feel seen and protected. The chapter concludes with the two of them leaving the party together, leaving a trail of gossip in their wake. They have successfully convinced the campus that they are an item, but as they walk away from the noise, the silence between them is heavy with the realization that pretending to be into each other is becoming much easier than they ever anticipated. The Deal by Elle Kennedy. Chapter 6. In Chapter 6 of The Deal, the narrative shifts from the high-octane social performance of the hockey party to the quiet, often more revealing, morning-after atmosphere. This chapter is essential because it deals with the fallout of their public debut and begins to peel back the protective layers both characters have spent years building. The chapter opens with the university buzzing about the hottest new couple on campus. Garrett's plan has worked with terrifying efficiency. Word has spread through the locker rooms and dorms that the untouchable Garrett Graham is finally off the market, and he has chosen the brainy, sarcastic music major. For Hannah, this newfound visibility is a double-edged sword. While it's exactly what she asked for to pique Justin Cole's interest, she finds herself struggling with the sudden influx of attention from strangers and the judgmental whispers of the puck bunnies who feel displaced by her. The core of the chapter focuses on a scheduled tutoring session that takes place in the aftermath of the party. When they meet, the energy between them has shifted. The fake intimacy from the night before, the whispering, the lingering touches, the protective stance Garrett took, has left a residual tension that makes it difficult to return to a strictly professional teacher-student dynamic. Garrett, usually so composed and arrogant, finds himself increasingly distracted by Hannah. He begins to realize that he isn't just performing for an audience anymore. He genuinely enjoys the way she challenges him, and the way she doesn't treat him like a trophy. He finds himself asking more personal questions, trying to understand what makes her tick beyond her GPA and her crush on Justin. A significant portion of this chapter is dedicated to the deepening of their emotional bond through vulnerability. As they sit together over textbooks, the conversation drifts away from ethics and toward their personal lives. Garrett shares more about the crushing weight of his father's expectations. He reveals the dark side of being a legacy athlete, where every success is expected and every failure is treated as a betrayal. Hannah, in turn, begins to let her guard down. While she doesn't fully disclose the details of her past trauma yet, she hints at the reasons behind her guarded nature and her need for control. This mutual sharing of secrets creates a sense of intimacy that is far more dangerous to their arrangement than any fake kiss could be. They are becoming each other's confidants, finding a rare sense of safety in one another that they lack in the rest of their chaotic college lives. The chapter also highlights Hannah's growing internal conflict regarding Justin Cole. Now that Justin is actually noticing her, sending her looks and attempting to strike up conversations, she realizes that the prize she spent months dreaming about feels surprisingly hollow. When she thinks about Justin, it's a theoretical attraction. But when she's with Garrett, the connection is visceral and grounded in reality. Garrett, observing this, feels a strange, possessive twinge that he tries to dismiss as part of the act. He tells himself he's just being a good coach, helping her win the game, but his internal monologue suggests he's starting to hate the idea of her actually ending up with the football player. The chapter concludes with a moment of quiet, domestic comfort that feels far too real for a fake relationship. As they wrap up their session, there's a lingering goodbye that highlights just how much they've come to rely on these hours together. They started as a jock and a nerd making a cold-blooded business deal, but by the end of Chapter 6, they have become a team in every sense of the word. The boundaries they set in Chapter 3 are becoming increasingly blurred, and the reader is left with the sense that the deal is no longer the thing keeping them together. It's the genuine affection and respect that has grown in the quiet spaces between their lessons. The Deal by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 7. In Chapter 7 of The Deal, the carefully constructed boundaries of the arrangement begin to crumble as the emotional intimacy from their study sessions translates into undeniable physical tension. The chapter centers on a shift in their routine, moving from the purely academic to a more social and personal integration. As Hannah spends more time at the hockey house, she is no longer just the tutor. She starts to become a fixture in Garrett's world, earning the wary respect of his teammates and observing the intense, high-pressure environment of elite college athletics. The chapter opens with Garrett continuing to play the role of the doting boyfriend in public, but the performance is becoming increasingly blurred with his genuine feelings. He finds himself looking for excuses to touch Hannah, a hand on her waist, a brush of her hair, not just when people are watching, but when they are alone. This physical escalation is handled with a mix of humor and heat, as Hannah's sharp tongue and quick wit keep Garrett on his toes. She isn't a passive participant in this fake relationship. She pushes back against his arrogance, which only serves to make him more attracted to her. For Garrett, who is used to girls who agree with everything he says, Hannah's independence is a breath of fresh air. A pivotal moment in this chapter occurs when they are watching a movie or hanging out in a low-stakes environment at the house. The conversation turns away from their deal and toward their genuine interests and fears. Garrett reveals more about the crushing weight of his father's legacy, detailing the emotional abuse and the impossible standards he is expected to meet. This vulnerability is a major turning point. Garrett doesn't let anyone see the real him, but he trusts Hannah enough to drop the mask. Hannah, in turn, finds herself feeling a deep sense of empathy and protection for him. She realizes that the cocky jock is a suit of armor he wears to survive his father's scrutiny. The physical tension reaches a boiling point during a moment of proximity where the fake dating aspect is forgotten. There is a heavy, charged atmosphere as they realize that the chemistry between them is no longer part of the act. Garrett is increasingly frustrated by the no-touching rules Hannah established, and Hannah is struggling to remember why she wanted Justin Cole in the first place. The chapter does an excellent job of showing how their mutual respect has created a foundation for a much deeper attraction. When they are together, the rest of the world, the hockey team, the ethics grade, and even the football player starts to fade into the background. By the end of Chapter 7, the power dynamic has shifted again. They are no longer just two people using each other for an end goal. They are two people who are becoming addicted to each other's presence. The deal is still technically in place, but the emotional stakes have skyrocketed. Hannah is forced to confront the fact that she is falling for the very person she vowed to avoid, and Garrett is beginning to realize that he wants Hannah for reasons that have nothing to do with his GPA. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy. Chapter 8. In Chapter 8 of The Deal, the boundaries of the arrangement are pushed to their absolute limit as Garrett and Hannah attend another high-profile social event. But this time, the stakes are significantly more personal. The chapter begins with the duo preparing for a massive party where the entire Briar University athletic elite will be present, including Hannah's crush, Justin Cole. By now, the campus gossip mill is in full swing, and everyone is watching the unlikely couple to see if the spark is real or just a flash in the pan. Garrett is determined to make this the night that finally pushes Justin over the edge into making a move on Hannah, but as he prepares to coach her through the evening, his own jealousy begins to simmer beneath his confident exterior. The internal monologue for both characters in this chapter reveals a growing sense of confusion. Hannah is struggling to maintain her cool around Garrett. She finds that the physical cues they've developed, the way he holds her hand or pulls her close to navigate a crowd, are starting to trigger a genuine physical response rather than the strategic one she intended. For Garrett, the transformation is even more startling. He realizes he is no longer just acting the part of the protective boyfriend. He is actually feeling protective. He finds himself scanning the room not for scouts or teammates, but to ensure Hannah is comfortable and happy. The chapter highlights a poignant moment where Garrett notices a flicker of Hannah's past trauma during a particularly loud or crowded moment, and he immediately shifts from cocky jock to a grounded, supportive presence, proving to Hannah that he is someone she can truly trust. The climax of the chapter occurs when Justin Cole finally approaches Hannah. This is the moment they have been working toward for weeks, the win for Hannah. Justin is clearly intrigued by the new Hannah, the one who is confident enough to snag the hockey captain. However, as Justin starts to flirt and suggests they should hang out, Hannah finds the experience jarringly hollow. Instead of the fireworks she expected, she finds herself comparing Justin's bland, safe conversation to the sharp, electric banter she shares with Garrett. She realizes that the version of herself she created for Justin is just a shadow, while the version of herself that Garrett sees, the smart, stubborn, and talented musician, is the one she actually likes. The chapter ends with a high-tension scene back at the hockey house or in a quiet corner of the party. The mission was a success, but the victory feels like a loss to Garrett. He has successfully delivered Hannah to the guy she wanted, but the thought of her actually leaving him to be with Justin is becoming unbearable. The physical tension between them reaches a breaking point. The performance for the crowd has bled into their private time, and the chapter closes with a palpable sense of longing. They are standing on the precipice of admitting that the deal is a failure because their feelings have become far too real to be contained by a contract. The Deal by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 9. In Chapter 9 of The Deal, the carefully maintained facade of their arrangement finally collapses under the weight of genuine desire and emotional honesty. The chapter begins in the quiet, charged aftermath of the party mentioned in Chapter 8. Hannah is reeling from the realization that getting exactly what she wanted, Justin Cole's attention, didn't feel nearly as good as she expected. Instead of feeling triumphant, she feels a strange sense of loss at the idea that her deal with Garrett might be coming to an end. Garrett is equally agitated, though he masks it with his usual bravado. The tension in the car ride or the walk back is thick, as both characters are acutely aware that the goal of their partnership has been achieved, yet neither of them wants to walk away. When they find themselves alone, the pretense of tutoring or strategy completely evaporates. Garrett, driven by a possessive streak he can no longer ignore, confronts Hannah about her interaction with Justin. This isn't just a coach checking in on a trainee. It is a man who is jealous of another man's claim on a woman he has grown to care for. The dialogue is sharp and raw, stripped of the playful banter that usually protects them. Hannah challenges him, asking why he cares so much if she goes out with Justin, since that was the point of the deal from the beginning. This confrontation forces Garrett to drop his golden boy mask entirely. He admits, in his own blunt and honest way, that he doesn't want her to be with Justin. He wants her for himself. The chapter then shifts into a deeply emotional and vulnerable territory. Hannah, who has spent the entire book guarding her heart and her body due to her past trauma, finds herself at a crossroads. She recognizes that Garrett is the first person she has trusted in years. He hasn't just been a fake boyfriend. He has been her defender, her student, and her friend. For the first time since her assault, she feels a sense of agency and safety with a man. She realizes that her attraction to Garrett isn't a performance for the public. It is a visceral, grounding reality. The fear that usually paralyzes her is still there, but her desire for Garrett and her trust in him are finally stronger than the ghost of her past. The climax of the chapter is their first truly intimate encounter. Unlike the performance at the parties, this is private, quiet, and intensely focused on each other. Elle Kennedy writes this scene with a focus on communication and consent, highlighting how Garrett's awareness of Hannah's history makes him incredibly patient and attentive. He constantly checks in with her, ensuring she is comfortable and in control of the pace. This shift in power, where Hannah is the one calling the shots, is transformative for her character. It marks a moment of healing where she reclaims her body and her sexuality. For Garrett, it is the moment he realizes that his feelings for Hannah are deeper than any casual fling he's ever had. He isn't just interested in her physically, he is becoming emotionally tethered to her. By the end of Chapter 9, the deal is effectively dead, replaced by the messy, terrifying, and exhilarating start of a real relationship. They have crossed a line that they can never uncross, and the rules they established in the early chapters are now completely irrelevant. They are no longer a jock and a tutor. They are two people who have found a profound connection in the most unlikely of circumstances. However, the chapter leaves the reader with the lingering question of how they will handle this transition. Now that the pretense is gone, they have to face the reality of their differing worlds and the external pressures, like Garrett's father and the hockey season, that haven't gone away. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy. Chapter 10. In Chapter 10 of The Deal, the narrative shifts into the delicate, emotionally charged territory of the morning after their first real encounter. The chapter begins with a significant change in tone. The high-octane sexual tension of the previous night has been replaced by a quiet, domestic intimacy that feels both beautiful and terrifying to both characters. As Hannah wakes up in Garrett's bed, she is immediately hit by a wave of vulnerability. For the first time in years, she has allowed someone into her most private space, and the realization that she didn't panic, that she actually felt safe and cherished, is a massive psychological milestone for her. However, the old instinct to protect herself remains, and she initially tries to treat the morning with a bit of signature deflective humor to keep the emotional stakes from feeling too overwhelming. Garrett, on the other hand, is surprisingly grounded and present. Usually, after a hookup, his instinct would be to get to practice or move on with his day, but with Hannah, he finds himself wanting to linger. He is acutely aware that their relationship has fundamentally changed. The deal served its purpose, but now he is faced with the reality that he doesn't want to let her go. He treats Hannah with a level of tenderness that is a stark contrast to his cocky jock persona. He makes sure she's comfortable and continues the open line of communication they established the night before. This chapter highlights Garrett's emotional intelligence. He knows that for Hannah, this wasn't just a physical act, but a profound act of trust, and he is determined not to break that trust. The central conflict of the chapter revolves around the labels and the transition from a fake relationship to a real one. They are forced to have the "what are we" conversation. Though in true Hannah and Garrett fashion, it is filled with banter and intellectual sparring. Hannah is hesitant to dive headfirst into a committed relationship with a campus superstar, especially since she still feels the looming presence of her past and the social divide between their worlds. She questions if Garrett is just caught up in the heat of the moment, or if he truly sees a future with her. Garrett is surprisingly firm in his stance. He makes it clear that he isn't interested in going back to the way things were. He wants to keep seeing her, and he wants it to be real. No more tutoring bargains, no more using Justin Cole as a smokescreen. However, the real world begins to intrude on their bubble. The chapter touches on the external pressures that continue to haunt them. For Garrett, it is the constant, suffocating expectation of his hockey career and the looming shadow of his father's disappointment if his grades don't stay up. For Hannah, it's the fear of being the girl who dates the hockey captain and losing her hard-won identity in this process. They spend time discussing the logistics of their lives, realizing that while the fake dating was a performance for others, the real dating will require them to actually integrate their very different schedules and priorities. The chapter concludes with a sense of cautious optimism. They agree to move forward, not as part of a deal, but as two people who genuinely like each other. There is a beautiful moment of shared quietude where they acknowledge that while they don't have all the answers, they have found something rare and worth protecting. The chapter ends with the feeling that the deal was just the catalyst, but the chemistry and respect they've built are the real foundation. They are officially a couple, but they are both aware that the road ahead, filled with hockey scouts, academic stress, and personal demons, will be the true test of what they've started. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy. Chapter 11. In Chapter 11 of The Deal, the honeymoon phase of Hannah and Garrett's new, authentic relationship is met with the harsh intrusion of Garrett's reality. While the previous chapter was a soft, domestic exploration of their feelings, this chapter serves as a stark reminder that Garrett's life is governed by a set of high-stakes pressures that Hannah is only just beginning to truly grasp. The focus shifts heavily toward Garrett's internal world and his toxic relationship with his father, Phil Graham, which acts as the primary antagonist to his peace of mind. The chapter opens with the tension of the hockey season mounting. Garrett is back on the ice, and while his academic standing has improved thanks to Hannah's tutoring, the physical and mental toll of maintaining his star athlete status is starting to show. We see Garrett in his element, fast, aggressive, and skilled. But there is an underlying sense of desperation in his play. He isn't just playing for the love of the game or the scouts. He is playing to keep his father's verbal and emotional abuse at bay. Hannah attends one of his practices or games, and for the first time, she sees the hockey version of Garrett up close. She notices the shift in his demeanor, how he becomes more guarded and intense, and she begins to realize that the cocky persona she first met is a necessary survival mechanism in this high-pressure world. The emotional core of the chapter is a confrontation, either via phone or a brief interaction, between Garrett and his father. Phil Graham is a former pro-hockey legend who views his son not as a person, but as a second chance at his own glory. He is dismissive of Garrett's academic struggles and indifferent to his personal life, focusing solely on stats, scouts, and the NHL. This interaction leaves Garrett in a dark place, spiraling into self-doubt and anger. When he meets up with Hannah later, he is prickly and withdrawn, a sharp contrast to the tender man she woke up with in the previous chapter. This creates a moment of friction. Hannah, who values communication and honesty, is frustrated by his sudden wall of silence. She has to decide whether to push him to open up or give him the space he thinks he needs. However, Chapter 11 also reinforces why they work as a couple. Instead of letting Garrett push her away, Hannah uses her characteristic wit and bluntness to force him to see that he doesn't have to carry his father's baggage alone. She provides a safe harbor that he has never had before. In a particularly moving scene, Garrett eventually lets the mask slip, admitting how much his father's expectations weigh on him. This vulnerability further solidifies their bond. Hannah realizes that while she is a survivor of physical trauma, Garrett is a survivor of emotional and psychological warfare. Their relationship becomes a mutual support system where they are both learning to heal from different types of scars. The chapter concludes with a sense of us against the world. While the external pressures of hockey and Phil Graham are not going away, Garrett finds that having Hannah in his corner makes the burden significantly lighter. He realizes that his success isn't just about the NHL anymore. It's about building a life where he is more than just a jersey number. For Hannah, seeing Garrett's struggles makes her own fears about her past feel more manageable, as she realizes she has the strength to be someone else's rock. They end the chapter more committed than ever, though the shadow of the upcoming big game and the inevitable confrontation with Garrett's father looms large on the horizon. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy. Chapter 12. In Chapter 12 of The Deal, the narrative spotlight shifts back to Hannah Wells as she prepares for a high-stakes musical performance that represents her own version of a championship game. While previous chapters focused heavily on Garrett's hockey world and his father's overbearing influence, this chapter explores Hannah's identity as a musician and the lingering effects of her past on her professional and personal confidence. As the performance approaches, Hannah is forced to reconcile the person she was, the girl who wanted to remain invisible to avoid pain, with the person she is becoming. A woman who is dating the most famous guy on campus and who is stepping into the spotlight with a solo performance. The chapter begins with Hannah in the music halls, deeply immersed in her rehearsals. Music is her sanctuary, a place where she can process emotions that are too complex for words. However, the pressure of the upcoming showcase is triggering her anxiety. She isn't just worried about hitting the right notes, she is worried about being seen. For a survivor of sexual assault, the act of standing alone on a stage and demanding the attention of an entire room is a terrifying prospect. Kennedy beautifully illustrates how Hannah's trauma isn't something that was fixed by her relationship with Garrett. Rather, it's a constant companion that she has to learn to manage every single day. Garrett's role in this chapter is one of unwavering, if somewhat loud, support. He shows up to her rehearsals, bringing his teammates along to act as her cheering section, which is both embarrassing and deeply touching for Hannah. This scene highlights the cultural clash between the quiet, disciplined world of classical music and the rowdy, exuberant world of college hockey. Garrett doesn't necessarily understand the technicalities of her music, but he understands her passion and her fear. He uses the same motivational tactics he uses on the ice to build her up, reminding her that she is the most talented person in the room and that she has worked harder than anyone else. This support is crucial because it helps Hannah see herself through his eyes, as a powerhouse rather than a victim. A significant portion of the chapter is dedicated to a quiet moment between them, where the topic of Hannah's past assault is handled with extreme care. As the stress of the performance brings her history to the surface, she shares more with Garrett about the night it happened and the legal and emotional aftermath. Garrett's reaction is a masterclass in empathy. He doesn't try to fix her or offer empty platitudes. Instead, he offers a steady presence, validating her anger and her fear without making her feel like she is broken. This conversation further strengthens the foundation of their relationship, moving it far beyond the deal that started it all. They are no longer just boyfriend and girlfriend. They are partners who are actively helping each other heal from different types of deep-seated pain. The chapter culminates in the lead-up to the performance itself. Hannah is backstage, fighting off a panic attack, when Garrett finds her. He gives her a final boost of confidence, not by telling her it will be okay, but by telling her that she is a warrior who has already survived the worst things life could throw at her. The chapter ends just as she is about to walk onto the stage. The tension is high, leaving the reader breathless to see if she can reclaim her voice and her power in front of an audience, signaling a major milestone in her journey toward recovery and self-actualization. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 13. In Chapter 13 of The Deal, the narrative reaches a dual climax as Hannah faces her internal fears on the music stage and Garrett faces the external terror of his father's controlling presence. The chapter begins with Hannah stepping out under the spotlights for her solo performance. The prose vividly captures her sensory experience, the blinding lights, the expectant silence of the auditorium, and the heavy thud of her heart. For Hannah, this isn't just a grade or a concert, it is the ultimate test of her recovery. As she begins to sing and play, she initially feels the familiar pull of her trauma trying to shrink her down, but she visualizes Garrett's unwavering belief in her. She pours all her pain, her resilience, and her burgeoning love into the music, delivering a performance that is transcendent. When she finishes, the standing ovation she receives is a powerful symbol of her reclaiming her space in the world. However, the triumph of the music hall is quickly overshadowed by the arrival of the storm in Garrett's life. Garrett's father, Phil Graham, makes a physical appearance, and his presence immediately sucks the air out of the room. He hasn't come to celebrate Hannah's success or to support his son. He has come to exert dominance. The interaction between Phil and Garrett is chillingly cold. Phil treats Garrett like a failing investment, criticizing his performance on the ice and dismissing his relationship with Hannah as a distraction that he needs to cut out of his life. The psychological abuse is laid bare here, as Phil uses his influence and Garrett's future career as a leash to keep him in line. The tension spikes when Hannah is introduced to Phil. Unlike the others who are intimidated by the Graham name, Hannah sees Phil exactly for what he is, a bully. She refuses to be cowed by his condescension, and her sharp, protective instincts for Garrett flare up. This creates a moment of extreme friction, as Garrett is caught between his lifelong fear of his father and his deep love for the woman who is finally standing up for him. Phil's blatant disrespect toward Hannah becomes a turning point for Garrett. Seeing his father treat the person he loves with the same vitriol he has endured for years forces Garrett to realize that he can no longer live in the middle ground. He has to choose between his father's approval and his own soul. The chapter explores the visceral aftermath of this encounter. After Phil leaves, Garrett is left in a state of emotional wreckage. The contrast between Hannah's high from her performance and Garrett's low from his father's visit creates a complex emotional landscape. Garrett feels a sense of shame that Hannah had to witness his father's behavior, while Hannah feels a fierce, protective rage. They retreat to a private space where Garrett finally breaks down, showing the full extent of the damage his father has inflicted over the years. This vulnerability is the most profound we have seen from him yet. He isn't the star captain or the cocky tutor, but a son who has been pushed to his breaking point. Chapter 13 concludes with a moment of intense solidarity. Hannah doesn't just offer comfort, she offers a way out. She reminds Garrett that his talent belongs to him, not his father, and that the deal they made was about more than just a grade. It was about taking control of their lives. The chapter ends with a sense of brewing rebellion. Garrett realizes that to be with Hannah and to be happy, he is going to have to go to war with the man who gave him everything but love. The stakes have shifted from staying on the team to saving himself, and the bond between Hannah and Garrett is now the only thing keeping him grounded as he prepares for the fallout. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy. Chapter 14. In Chapter 14 of The Deal, the narrative focus shifts to the direct fallout of the confrontation with Phil Graham and the beginning of Garrett's true rebellion. The chapter opens with a heavy, somber atmosphere as Garrett grapples with the realization that he can no longer exist in a state of quiet submission. For his entire life, he has equated his worth with his hockey performance because that was the only language his father spoke. However, seeing how Phil treated Hannah in the previous chapter has acted as a catalyst. Garrett realizes that if he allows his father to control his career and his academics, he is essentially allowing his father to control who he loves. This internal shift marks a massive growth spurt in Garrett's character. He moves from being a victim of emotional manipulation to a man willing to burn bridges for his own independence. The chapter features a pivotal conversation between Garrett and his coach. Garrett has to come clean about the pressure he's been under and the role his father has played in his academic struggles. This is a high-risk move, as Phil Graham has deep roots in the hockey world, but Garrett finds a surprising amount of support from the coaching staff. They value him as a captain and a player, and seeing him finally take responsibility for his own life, separate from his father's shadow, actually earns him more respect. This professional validation gives Garrett the boost he needs to face the final grueling stretch of the hockey season with a renewed sense of purpose. He is no longer playing to satisfy a ghost. He is playing for himself and for the future he wants to build with Hannah. On the home front, the relationship between Hannah and Garrett enters a phase of deep, quiet support. Hannah becomes his anchor during this turbulent time. She doesn't just provide physical comfort, she helps him navigate the logistical nightmare of his father's interference. There is a beautiful reversal of roles in this chapter. Where Garrett once helped Hannah find her voice and social confidence, Hannah is now helping Garrett find his moral compass and the strength to say no to the person who terrifies him most. Their bond is no longer defined by the deal or even just by physical attraction. It is defined by a shared resilience. They are two individuals who have decided that their pasts, whether it be Hannah's trauma or Garrett's abuse, will no longer dictate their futures. The chapter also highlights the team aspect of Garrett's life. His teammates, sensing the tension and knowing the reputation of Phil Graham, rally around their captain. There is a sense of brotherhood that provides a necessary contrast to the toxic paternal relationship Garrett has endured. The locker room scenes in this chapter are charged with a sense of us against the world, reinforcing the idea that Garrett has a family of his own making. As the chapter draws to a close, the focus returns to the ice. The big game is approaching, and the pressure is at an all-time high. Garrett stands on the precipice of his pro career, but for the first time, he feels like he's in the driver's seat. The chapter ends with a quiet, reflective moment between Hannah and Garrett. They acknowledge that the road ahead is going to be difficult, and that Phil Graham isn't the type of man to go away quietly. However, the fear that once paralyzed Garrett has been replaced by a cold, hard determination. He is ready to face whatever comes next, knowing that Hannah is waiting for him at the end of the rink. The deal has evolved into a life-changing partnership, and the reader is left with the sense that the final battle for Garrett's freedom is just beginning. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 15. In Chapter 15 of The Deal, the narrative tension reaches a fever pitch as the high of Garrett's rebellion meets the cold reality of his father's reach. The chapter centers on the big game, a crucial matchup for the Briar University hockey team that is crawling with NHL scouts. For Garrett, this should be the pinnacle of his college career, but the atmosphere is tainted by the looming threat of Phil Graham. Garrett enters the arena with a new mindset. He is playing for himself, but the psychological weight of his father's presence in the stands is a physical pressure he can feel in his bones. Hannah is there, of course, positioned as his emotional North Star in the crowd, providing a sense of grounding that he desperately needs to stay focused on the ice. The game itself is depicted with visceral intensity. Garrett is playing at an elite level, demonstrating not just his physical prowess, but his strategic brilliance as a captain. However, the chapter takes a dark turn when it becomes clear that Phil Graham isn't done trying to sabotage his son's independence. A major betrayal occurs when Garrett discovers that his father has attempted to manipulate his professional prospects behind his back. Phil has been whispering in the ears of scouts, not to help Garrett, but to ensure Garrett remains under his thumb, even in the pros. This revelation hits Garrett mid-game, threatening to shatter his focus and send him into a spiral of rage. He realizes that his father would rather see him fail on his own terms than succeed on his own, a realization that is both heartbreaking and liberating. The conflict spills over into a confrontation during a break or immediately following the game's peak action. The betrayal isn't just professional, it's personal. Garrett finds out that Phil has tried to use Hannah as a pawn once again, attempting to intimidate her or drive a wedge between them by painting a picture of a future where Garrett's distraction ruins his career. This is the ultimate test for the couple. Instead of the betrayal pulling them apart, it serves to solidify their alliance. Hannah's reaction to Phil's manipulation is one of fierce, unyielding loyalty. She refuses to let his toxic narrative take root, and she stands by Garrett with a strength that matches his own on the ice. The emotional fallout of this chapter is profound. Garrett is forced to publicly and privately distance himself from the Graham legacy. He has to tell the scouts and the world that he is his own man. This moment of standing up to a titan of the industry is terrifying, but it is also the moment Garrett finally grows up. He realizes that the only way to win is to stop playing his father's game entirely. The chapter explores the theme of chosen family versus biological family, as Garrett's teammates and Hannah provide the support system that his father never could. By the end of chapter 15, the game has ended, but the true battle is just beginning. Garrett has successfully navigated the physical challenge of the hockey season, but the emotional cost of his father's betrayal is high. He and Hannah are left to navigate the debris of his relationship with Phil, knowing that their bond is the only thing that remained unbreakable during the storm. The chapter closes with a sense of the end of the beginning. The deal is long gone, the season is winding down, and they are facing a future that is entirely unwritten and entirely their own. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 16. In Chapter 16 of The Deal, the narrative transitions from the high-stakes adrenaline of the hockey arena to a more reflective and deeply emotional space where Hannah and Garrett must navigate the long-term reality of their relationship. The storm of Phil Graham's betrayal has passed, but the wreckage remains, and this chapter focuses on how the couple builds a new life out of those pieces. The deal that brought them together is now a distant memory, replaced by a profound, battle-tested love that has survived both external sabotage and internal demons. The chapter opens with a sense of relief and exhaustion. With the hockey season's most intense pressures behind him, Garrett is finally able to breathe. However, the absence of his father's guidance, even though that guidance was toxic, leaves a void that Garrett has to fill with his own identity. He spends much of this chapter coming to terms with his future on his own terms. He begins to realize that while hockey is his passion, it no longer defines his entire worth. This internal shift allows him to be more present for Hannah than ever before. He's no longer the distracted, stressed-out jock. He is a man who is deeply invested in his partner's happiness and healing. A significant portion of Chapter 16 is dedicated to Hannah's ongoing journey toward recovery. While her musical performance in Chapter 13 was a major breakthrough, this chapter explores the quieter, day-to-day victories of living as a survivor. There is a moving scene that illustrates her growing comfort with physical intimacy and her ability to advocate for her own needs. Kennedy emphasizes that healing isn't a linear path with a fixed ending, but a continuous process of reclaiming one's body and mind. Garrett's role continues to be one of patient, respectful support, proving that he was never just playing a part. Their relationship becomes a model of healthy communication, where they can discuss their fears and triggers without judgment. The chapter also addresses the social landscape of Briar University. The fake couple has become a legend on campus, but Hannah and Garrett find themselves pulling away from the noise of the parties and the gossip. They spend more time in their own bubble, focusing on their studies and their respective passions. There is a sense of domesticity that settles over them, studying together, supporting each other through finals, and planning for a summer that looks very different from the ones they had envisioned at the start of the semester. This shift highlights how much they have both matured. They no longer need the validation of the campus elite or the cool crowd to feel secure. As the chapter draws to a close, the focus turns toward the horizon. The threat of Phil Graham hasn't entirely vanished, But his power over Garrett has been neutralized because Garrett no longer fears his disapproval. There is a sense of finality to the conflict, as Garrett makes a definitive choice to prioritize his mental health and his relationship over the legacy his father tried to force upon him. The chapter ends with a quiet moment between Hannah and Garrett that mirrors their first meeting, but with a completely transformed dynamic. They are no longer a jock and a tutor bartering for grades and dates. They are two people who have found a home in each other. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 17. In Chapter 17 of The Deal, the narrative focus shifts to the immediate aftermath of the high-stakes hockey game and the growing complexity of Hannah and Garrett's relationship as they navigate their first major hurdle as a real couple. The chapter opens with a sense of emotional exhaustion. Garrett is reeling from the dual intensity of his performance on the ice and the crushing weight of his father's psychological warfare. While he achieved a professional victory in front of the Scouts, the personal cost of defying Phil Graham has left him in a dark, contemplative space. This chapter is crucial for demonstrating that their relationship is no longer just about light-hearted banter or sexual chemistry. It is becoming a lifeline for both of them as they face their respective demons. The core of the chapter explores the concept of safe spaces. Garrett finds himself seeking refuge in Hannah's presence, not just for comfort, but as a way to ground himself in a reality that isn't dictated by his father's expectations. There is a moving sequence where Garrett lets his guard down completely, moving past the tough athlete persona to show Hannah the raw, unedited version of his grief and anger. For Garrett, who has been conditioned to view vulnerability as a weakness, this level of transparency is a massive act of bravery. Hannah responds not with pity, but with a fierce, unwavering loyalty that reinforces her role as his equal. She doesn't try to solve his problems for him, but she makes it clear that he no longer has to carry them alone. As they spend more time together in this chapter, the physical intimacy between them continues to evolve. It is no longer driven by the frantic energy of their initial attraction, but by a deeper, more emotional connection. Kennedy uses these scenes to highlight Hannah's continued progress in her own healing journey. She is increasingly comfortable in her own skin, and her relationship with Garrett has provided a foundation of trust that allows her to explore her desires without the shadow of her past trauma constantly looming over her. This chapter serves as a testament to the fact that their deal has transformed into a partnership that is actively facilitating the growth and recovery of both individuals. However, the chapter also touches on the reality of the social world around them. While they are cocooned in their private intimacy, the university remains a factor. There is a sense of the calm before the storm as they prepare for the end of the semester and the inevitable transition into summer. They discuss their plans and the logistical challenges of maintaining their relationship once they are no longer in the daily routine of campus life. This adds a layer of realism to the story. They aren't just characters in a romance novel, but college students facing the very real anxieties of the future and the transition into adulthood. Chapter 17 concludes with a quiet moment of resolution. Garrett realizes that while he may have lost his father's approval, he has gained something far more valuable, a sense of self and a partner who truly sees him. The chapter ends on a note of emotional solidarity, with both Hannah and Garrett acknowledging that while their journey started as a calculated arrangement, it has become the most authentic thing in their lives. The reader is left with a sense of peace, even as the broader conflicts of Garrett's career and Hannah's academic goals continue to move forward in the background. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 18. In Chapter 18 of The Deal, the narrative shifts away from the high-octane drama of the hockey rink and into the quiet, more profound territory of emotional domesticity. Following the explosive confrontation with Garrett's father and the successful navigation of the mid-season pressures, This chapter serves as a deep dive into how Garrett and Hannah function when the world isn't watching. The chapter begins by exploring Garrett's internal state. He is physically exhausted from the grueling schedule of the hockey season, but mentally, he is in a state of transition. For the first time in his life, he is forced to define himself outside of the Graham legacy. The silence from his father is heavy, but instead of filling that void with anxiety or reckless behavior, Garrett finds himself seeking the steady, grounding presence of Hannah. Their relationship has evolved past the performance stage and into a phase of deep-seated trust that allows Garrett to drop his guard in ways he never thought possible for a man in his position. The physical and emotional intimacy in this chapter is described with a sense of lingering tenderness that highlights how far both characters have come. As they spend time together in the quiet of their dorms or the hockey house, the conversation turns toward the future and the vulnerabilities that come with it. Garrett opens up to Hannah about his genuine fears regarding the upcoming NHL draft. Not just the fear of where he will be picked, but the existential fear that his entire identity has been constructed around a game that could end at any moment. He admits to a rare sense of insecurity, questioning if people like him for who he is or simply for the jersey he wears. Hannah, with her characteristic bluntness and deep empathy, acts as his emotional anchor. She reminds him that she was the one person who saw him at his worst, failing ethics and acting like an arrogant jock, and she liked the person she found underneath the bravado. This validation is a turning point for Garrett, as he realizes that Hannah is the first person to value his mind and his heart over his athletic stats. Simultaneously, the chapter continues to weave in Hannah's ongoing healing process. While she has made massive strides in reclaiming her voice and her sexuality, Kennedy illustrates that recovery is a continuous journey. There are subtle moments where Hannah has to navigate her own internal triggers, and the way Garrett handles these moments, with patience, consent, and a lack of ego, further cements their bond. They develop a language of their own, one built on check-ins and mutual respect, which stands in stark contrast to the toxic, high-pressure environments they both grew up in. This chapter reinforces the idea that they aren't just a couple, they are each other's safe haven. They find comfort in the mundane, from studying together for finals to simply existing in the same room, proving that the foundation of their relationship is built on a friendship that has become unbreakable. The chapter also touches on the reality of the approaching end of the school year. The academic pressure of finals provides a relatable, high-stakes backdrop to their romance, but the true underlying tension comes from the uncertainty of what happens next. They begin to discuss the logistics of the summer and the potential for long distance once the university bubble pops. This conversation is handled with a mix of humor and serious commitment, as neither of them is willing to let go of what they've built. By the end of the chapter, the reader feels the weight of the real world encroaching on their happiness, but there is an overriding sense of solidarity. They have moved from a calculated deal to a life-altering partnership, and as they prepare to face the next chapter of their lives, they do so with the knowledge that they are no longer fighting their battles alone. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 19. In Chapter 19 of The Deal, the narrative shifts its focus to the growing complexity of Hannah and Garrett's social integration and the lingering shadows of Hannah's past. Now that they are an official couple, the novelty of their relationship has worn off for the rest of the campus, but the internal work of building a life together is just beginning. The chapter opens with a deeper look at Hannah's social world. While she spent the first half of the book as an outsider looking in, she is now firmly entrenched in the hockey team's inner circle. This brings a new set of challenges, as she has to navigate the puck bunny culture and the intense scrutiny that comes with dating a star athlete. However, her sharp wit and refusal to be intimidated continue to serve her well. earning her a unique position of respect among Garrett's teammates. A significant portion of this chapter is dedicated to a specific social event, a smaller, more intimate gathering than the massive parties of the earlier chapters. During this evening, Hannah is forced into a proximity with people who remind her of the old Hannah, the one who was defined by her trauma and her desire to remain invisible. This triggers a moment of internal conflict for her. While she loves Garrett and the confidence he has helped her find, she occasionally feels a sense of imposter syndrome, wondering if this new, bold version of herself is sustainable. Garrett, sensing her shift in mood, remains hyper-attuned to her emotional state. His ability to read her silence is a testament to how far their connection has progressed. He no longer needs her to explain her triggers, because he has learned them through observation and empathy. The chapter also dives into the professional pressures mounting for Garrett. The NHL draft is no longer a distant dream, but a looming reality. He receives news or updates regarding his scouting reports that force him to confront the possibility of being moved far away from Briar University. This adds a bittersweet layer to their interactions. Every moment of domestic bliss, cooking together, studying, or just talking, is underscored by the ticking clock of their senior years. They begin to have the difficult, adult conversations about what happens when their time at university ends. Garrett expresses a fierce desire to keep Hannah in his life, regardless of where his career takes him. But Hannah, ever the realist, worries about the toll a high-profile, long-distance relationship might take on her budding music career. The climax of the chapter involves a confrontation with a minor character or an old acquaintance of Hannah's that brings her past trauma back to the forefront in a public way. This moment is handled with great sensitivity, showing that while Hannah has healed significantly, the scars are still there. Garrett's reaction is one of protective but restrained support. He follows Hannah's lead rather than jumping in to save her, which is exactly what she needs. This exchange reinforces the theme of agency that runs throughout the book. By the end of the chapter, the two of them are left in a state of quiet solidarity. They have successfully navigated another real-world obstacle, proving that their bond is strong enough to handle more than just fake dates and ethics exams. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 20. In Chapter 20 of The Deal, the narrative focus returns to the looming academic and professional pressures that originally brought Hannah and Garrett together. With the end of the semester approaching, the stakes for Garrett's ethics grade reach a critical point. While their relationship has blossomed into something deeply personal, the business side of their arrangement remains a necessity. Garrett is still fighting to maintain the GPA required for his NHL eligibility, and this chapter highlights the grueling work ethic he has developed under Hannah's tutelage. The dynamic between them in this chapter is a beautiful blend of their initial teacher-student roles and their new reality as a devoted couple. Hannah continues to push him intellectually, refusing to let him slack off even when they are exhausted, which Garrett has come to respect as a sign of her genuine belief in his potential. A significant portion of the chapter is dedicated to the growing realness of their integration into each other's lives. Garrett spends more time in Hannah's world, gaining a deeper appreciation for the discipline required in her music studies. There is a sense of mutual inspiration as Hannah watches Garrett's dedication to hockey, and he watches her dedication to her craft. They both find the strength to push through their own obstacles. However, the chapter also introduces a new layer of tension when Garrett receives an unexpected communication regarding his standing with the Scouts. This serves as a reminder that their time in the university bubble is finite. The prospect of the future, and the potential for them to be separated by professional drafts, starts to transition from a theoretical worry to a concrete problem they must solve together. The emotional core of the chapter involves a quiet moment where the couple discusses their origin story. They reflect on the absurdity of the deal that started it all, laughing at how far they've come from the days when Hannah was trying to use Garrett to get Justin's attention. This moment of levity is important because it shows that they have fully moved past the insecurities and pretenses of the early chapters. Hannah admits that she can't even remember what she saw in Justin, realizing that the perfection she was chasing was nothing compared to the messy, honest, and supportive reality she has with Garrett. For Garrett, this is a massive ego boost, but it also reinforces his desire to be the man Hannah deserves, someone who is successful not just on the ice, but as a partner. The chapter concludes with a sense of focused determination. They are no longer just surviving the semester. They are thriving in spite of the pressures from Garrett's father and the demands of their respective careers. As they buckle down for the final stretch of exams, there is a palpable sense of us against the world. The chapter ends with a quiet, domestic scene that emphasizes their solidarity, leaving the reader with the impression that while the external challenges are getting tougher, the bond between Hannah and Garrett has become virtually unbreakable. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 21. In Chapter 21 of The Deal, the narrative shifts back to the complex and often painful reality of Garrett's family life. While his relationship with Hannah has been a source of immense joy and healing, the shadow of his father, Phil Graham, continues to loom large. The chapter begins with Garrett trying to maintain his focus on both his upcoming exams and his performance on the ice. But he is blindsided by a new development regarding his father's interference in his life. Garrett discovers that his father hasn't just been trying to control his professional future, but has been actively working behind the scenes to undermine Garrett's sense of autonomy at Briar University. The emotional weight of this chapter centers on Garrett's realization that his father's abuse isn't just a relic of the past. It is an ongoing, active campaign to keep him subservient. This discovery sends Garrett into a tailspin of anger and resentment. For the first time, we see a darker, more volatile side of his personality as he struggles to process the depth of his father's betrayal. He feels a sense of profound isolation, questioning if he will ever truly be free of the Graham name and the expectations that come with it. Hannah plays a pivotal role in this chapter as Garrett's emotional anchor. When Garrett is at his lowest point, tempted to lash out or retreat into his old habits of emotional distance, Hannah refuses to let him go. She provides a safe space for him to vent his frustrations and helps him navigate the complicated feelings of love and hate he has for his father. Their relationship is tested here, as Garrett's anger can be overwhelming, but Hannah's strength and refusal to be intimidated by his mood prove once again that she is exactly the partner he needs. She reminds him that his father's power only exists as long as Garrett allows it to affect his self-worth. The chapter also touches on the practical implications of Phil Graham's actions. There is a concern that his father's meddling could affect Garrett's standing with the NHL scouts or his academic eligibility. This adds a layer of suspense to the story, as the deal they made at the beginning of the book to keep Garrett on the ice is suddenly in jeopardy again. However, instead of facing this threat alone, Garrett and Hannah approach it as a team. They begin to strategize on how to counteract Phil's influence, showing a level of maturity and partnership that has grown significantly since the early chapters. By the end of Chapter 21, the atmosphere is one of grim determination. Garrett has accepted that his relationship with his father is likely beyond repair, but he has also found a new sense of purpose in protecting the life he has built with Hannah. The chapter ends with a quiet but powerful moment of solidarity between them, reinforcing the idea that they are stronger together than they are apart. They are no longer just playing at being a couple. They are fighting for their future against a common enemy. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy. Chapter 22. In Chapter 22 of The Deal, the narrative focus shifts to the immediate and heavy consequences of Garrett's defiance against his father. While the previous chapter was defined by the shock of discovery, this chapter is about the grit required to maintain one's autonomy when the world feels like it is closing in. Garrett is forced to navigate a trial by fire as the final stretch of the semester coincides with the most intense period of hockey scouting, all while his father, Phil Graham, begins to pull the strings he has left in an attempt to force Garrett back into submission. The chapter begins with a palpable sense of tension in the hockey locker room. Garrett's teammates and coaches are aware that something is shifting, and while they are supportive, the professional pressure is undeniable. Garrett has to perform at an elite level while knowing that his father is actively speaking to NHL scouts, potentially poisoning the well by painting Garrett as difficult or unfocused due to his relationship and his academic struggles. This professional sabotage is heartbreaking to witness, but Garrett handles it with a newfound maturity. Instead of exploding in rage, he channels that energy into his gameplay, proving that his focus is sharper than ever because he is finally playing for himself. On the academic front, the pressure is equally high. Hannah remains his steadfast tutor and partner, but the chapter highlights the physical and mental exhaustion they are both facing. There is a poignant scene where the roles are slightly reversed. Hannah is the one feeling the weight of the world, and Garrett has to step up to be her emotional rock. This reinforces the idea that their relationship is a balanced partnership. They are no longer just a jock and a tutor. They are two people who are deeply integrated into each other's success. The domestic scenes in this chapter are filled with late-night study sessions and quiet moments of solidarity that serve as a necessary contrast to the chaos of the hockey arena. The emotional core of the chapter involves Garrett officially drawing a line in the sand regarding his family. He has to make a series of difficult decisions about how much access he will allow his father to have to his life and his future career. This process of divorcing himself from his father's influence is painful, but Hannah's presence makes it possible. She provides the perspective he lacks, helping him see that his talent belongs to him and him alone. By the end of the chapter, Garrett feels a sense of terrifying freedom. He has successfully stood his ground, but the chapter leaves the reader with the lingering question of how Phil Graham will retaliate now that his direct control has been severed. The chapter concludes with a sense of quiet triumph. Despite the external pressures, Garrett and Hannah are closer than ever. They have survived the first wave of consequences, and as they look toward the final exams and the end of the season, there is a feeling that they can handle whatever comes next as long as they are together. The Deal by Elle Kennedy. Chapter 23. In Chapter 23 of The Deal, the narrative transitions from the heavy external pressures of Garrett's family life to a more internal exploration of Hannah's growth and the social complexities of being a hockey girlfriend. Now that the initial thrill of their public relationship has settled, Hannah is forced to navigate the social hierarchy of Briar University as a permanent fixture by Garrett's side, rather than just a temporary tutor. The chapter revolves around a social gathering or a day on campus, where Hannah is thrust into the path of those who once overlooked her. Unlike the earlier chapters where she felt like an imposter, Hannah begins to realize that her confidence isn't just a byproduct of dating Garrett. It's a muscle she has been building herself. However, she still encounters the puck bunny culture, a group of women who view her with a mix of jealousy and confusion, unable to understand how the quiet music girl landed the team captain. Hannah handles these interactions with her trademark wit, but the chapter highlights the subtle sting of social judgment that still exists. For Garrett, this chapter is about integration. He is no longer trying to keep his hockey life and his Hannah life separate. He brings her into the inner sanctum of the team more frequently and is fiercely protective of her. There is a specific moment in this chapter where Garrett has to choose between a team tradition or obligation and a commitment to Hannah. His choice to prioritize her shows his teammates, and Hannah, that he is no longer playing a game. He is a man in love, and the deal that started their journey is now a source of amusement rather than a secret burden. Interestingly, Chapter 23 often touches on the closure of the Justin Cole storyline. Hannah sees or interacts with Justin again, and the contrast between her past crush and her current reality is stark. She realizes that Justin was a safe, distant fantasy she used to protect herself from real intimacy. Looking at him now, he seems small compared to the depth and complexity of Garrett. This realization is a major psychological milestone for Hannah. She isn't just over Justin. She has outgrown the version of herself that thought she deserved someone who didn't truly see her. The chapter ends on a high note of domesticity. Away from the noise of the campus and the looming threat of Garrett's father, the two share a quiet evening that reinforces their compatibility. They discuss their mutual progress, Garrett's improved grades, and Hannah's upcoming musical milestones. The chapter leaves the reader with a sense of stability, though it is the calm before the storm as the final weeks of the semester and the ultimate decision regarding the NHL draft draw closer. The Deal by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 24. In Chapter 24 of The Deal, the narrative tension shifts toward the high-stakes academic climax that has been building since the first page. With final exams looming, the pressure on Garrett to perform in his ethics class reaches its absolute peak. The deal that started as a clever arrangement is now a matter of professional survival, as a failing grade would officially disqualify him from the upcoming NHL draft and destroy his dreams of a pro career. This chapter beautifully illustrates the reversal of their initial dynamic. While Garrett was once a reluctant student, he is now a driven man who takes his studies as seriously as his hockey practice, largely because he wants to prove himself worthy of the future he is building with Hannah. The emotional core of the chapter, however, involves the surfacing of a long-buried secret from Garrett's past. During a particularly intense late-night study session, the emotional walls that Garrett has carefully maintained finally give way. He shares a specific traumatic memory involving his father's physical and emotional abuse that he has never told anyone else. This revelation provides a missing piece of the puzzle for Hannah, explaining why Garrett is so terrified of failure and why he feels the need to constantly project an image of perfection. By sharing this secret, Garrett isn't just venting. He is handing Hannah the keys to his most private self, solidifying their bond in a way that goes far beyond typical college romance. Hannah's reaction to this secret is a masterclass in empathy and strength. She doesn't treat Garrett like he is broken, nor does she offer empty platitudes. Instead, she uses her own experience as a survivor to help him navigate the shame he feels. This chapter highlights the profound mirroring in their relationship, how they both use their individual traumas to help the other heal. Hannah's presence allows Garrett to reframe his past, not as a source of shame, but as a source of the resilience that made him the leader he is today. This emotional breakthrough happens just as they are preparing for the final exam, giving Garrett a sense of mental clarity he has never had before. The chapter concludes with the morning of the big ethics final. The atmosphere is thick with anticipation as Hannah walks Garrett to the classroom door. It is a full-circle moment that mirrors their very first encounter, but with the roles completely transformed. They are no longer a jock and a tutor engaged in a transaction. They are a team facing a milestone together. As Garrett enters the room to take the test that will determine his entire future, the chapter ends on a note of cautious optimism. The secret is out, the work has been done, and for the first time, Garrett feels like he is standing on his own 2 feet, ready to claim a life that his father can no longer touch. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 25. In Chapter 25 of The Deal, the narrative focus shifts to the agonizing period of waiting that follows the final ethics exam. The chapter opens with a heavy sense of anticipation that permeates both Hannah and Garrett's lives. For Garrett, the exam wasn't just a test of academic knowledge, it was the final hurdle in a lifelong race toward professional legitimacy. The silence following the test is filled with a mix of relief and anxiety, as he realizes that his entire future, his NHL draft status, and his ability to stay at Briar now rests in the hands of a professor. Hannah remains his constant support system during this time, helping him manage the nervous energy that usually manifests as restless pacing or excessive time on the ice. The emotional core of the chapter explores the afterglow of the secret Garrett shared in the previous chapter. Rather than feeling awkward or exposed, Garrett feels a profound sense of lightness. The intimacy between him and Hannah deepens as they navigate this new level of honesty. There is a particularly moving scene where they spend time away from the noise of the hockey house, simply enjoying each other's company without the looming shadow of the deal. This chapter reinforces that they have successfully transitioned into a mature, stable relationship. They begin to make plans that extend far beyond the semester, discussing summer visits and how they will handle the potential distance if Garrett is drafted by a team far away. However, the real world interrupts their peace when the exam results are finally posted. The tension in this scene is palpable as Garrett logs on to check his grade. The revelation of his success is a massive emotional climax for both characters. It isn't just a passing grade. It is a validation of Garrett's hard work and Hannah's belief in him. This victory officially clears the path for Garrett's professional career, and the celebration that follows among his teammates is exuberant. Yet, amidst the cheering, there is a quiet, private moment between Hannah and Garrett, where they acknowledge that while Hannah was the tutor, Garrett was the one who did the internal work to change his life. The chapter concludes with a shift in the power dynamic regarding Phil Graham. Now that Garrett has secured his academic standing on his own merit, his father's primary leverage is gone. Garrett feels a surge of genuine independence, realizing that he no longer needs to fear the man who tried to control him through threats of failure. The chapter ends on a note of triumph and love, with Hannah and Garrett standing on the threshold of a new chapter in their lives, free from the constraints of the deal and the expectations of others. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 26. In Chapter 26 of The Deal, the narrative shifts into a period of bittersweet celebration as the academic year winds down and the reality of the future begins to set in. With the ethics final behind them and Garrett's eligibility secured, the pressure of the deal has officially evaporated, leaving him and Hannah to navigate the complexities of a relationship that is no longer bound by grades or social strategy. The chapter opens with a sense of collective relief at Briar University as the students prepare for the end-of-year festivities. But for Hannah and Garrett, this time is marked by a deeper, more private reflection on how much they have changed since the start of the semester. The emotional core of the chapter revolves around the finality of their time on campus. As they attend the last few parties and social gatherings, there is a palpable shift in how they are perceived by their peers. They are no longer the unlikely pair or the jock and the tutor. They are one of the most solid couples on campus. However, this public acceptance is contrasted with the private anxiety they both feel regarding the upcoming NHL draft. Garrett is finally on the verge of achieving his lifelong dream, but the realization that his professional career could take him to a city thousands of miles away from Hannah creates a lingering tension. They spend much of the chapter balancing the joy of Garrett's success with the fear of an impending long-distance reality. A significant portion of Chapter 26 is dedicated to the deepening of their domestic intimacy. Away from the noise of the hockey house, they share quiet moments that highlight their growth. Garrett, who once feared vulnerability, is now entirely open with Hannah about his hopes and fears. He admits that while he wants the NHL more than anything, he is terrified of losing the home he has found in her. Hannah, in turn, continues to reclaim her own narrative. She prepares for her final music evaluations with a newfound confidence, realizing that her voice is stronger than it has ever been. The chapter beautifully illustrates how they have become each other's primary source of strength, proving that their partnership was never just about a grade. It was about mutual survival and healing. The chapter concludes with the arrival of draft day looming on the horizon. The atmosphere is thick with a mixture of excitement and dread. As Garrett receives final calls from agents and scouts, the reality of his departure becomes concrete. The chapter ends on a poignant note, with Hannah and Garrett holding on to each other in the quiet of the night, acutely aware that their lives are about to change forever. They have won the battle against Garrett's father and Hannah's past, but now they must face the challenge of a world that wants to pull them in different directions. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 27. In Chapter 27 of The Deal, the narrative reaches a massive emotional and professional milestone, the NHL draft. This chapter is a whirlwind of nerves, anticipation, and the realization of a lifelong dream for Garrett, but it is also a poignant moment for his relationship with Hannah. After months of academic struggle, family trauma, and secret tutoring sessions, everything Garrett has worked for is finally on the line. The chapter opens with the high-energy, high-stress environment of the draft, where every phone call and every announcement could change the trajectory of Garrett's life. For Garrett, the day is bittersweet. While he is surrounded by his teammates and coaches who have become his true family, the absence of a healthy relationship with his father is a heavy silence in the room. However, unlike the Garrett we met at the start of the book, he is no longer seeking Phil Graham's approval. He is standing on his own merit, backed by the support of the people who actually love him. Hannah remains his primary anchor throughout the chaos. She is there not just as a supportive girlfriend, but as the person who knows exactly how much this moment cost him emotionally. Her presence provides a calm center to the storm of scouts, agents, and media attention. The climax of the chapter occurs when Garrett's name is finally called. The moment of being drafted is a visceral release of tension, marking his official entry into the world of professional hockey. It is a validation of his talent and his refusal to let his father's sabotage ruin his career. The celebration is explosive, but the most significant part of the scene is the private look shared between Hannah and Garrett. They both know that his being drafted is the ultimate win against the forces that tried to keep him down. However, the joy is immediately tempered by the reality of where he has been drafted. The location of the team brings the long-distance conversation to the forefront. As Garrett begins to process the logistics of his new professional life, he and Hannah are forced to confront the fact that their time in the Briar bubble is coming to an end. This chapter highlights their maturity. Instead of panicking, they lean into each other. They acknowledge that while the distance will be a challenge, the foundation they built during the deal is strong enough to withstand it. The chapter ends with a sense of immense accomplishment and a touch of melancholy. Garrett has his professional future secured, and Hannah has her voice back, but the easy days of seeing each other every day on campus are numbered. They close the chapter by choosing to focus on the now, celebrating Garrett's success and the fact that they are facing this next transition as a united front. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 28. In Chapter 28 of The Deal, The narrative shifts into the emotional aftermath of the NHL draft. While the previous chapter was a whirlwind of professional triumph and public celebration, this chapter is significantly more intimate, focusing on the reality of what Garrett's new career means for his relationship with Hannah. The high of being drafted is met with the sobering realization that their daily lives are about to change drastically. Garrett is now an official professional athlete, which brings a new set of responsibilities, media obligations, and travel schedules that threaten to pull him away from the quiet, domestic world he has built with Hannah. The chapter opens with the couple trying to find a moment of peace amidst the chaos of agents and congratulatory messages. Garrett is grappling with the transition from being a college student to a professional entity. He feels a sense of immense pride, but it is shadowed by the guilt of knowing his career will take him away from Hannah. This chapter highlights Garrett's growth as a partner. Instead of retreating into his career or becoming self-absorbed in his success, he is hyper-focused on how this affects Hannah. He repeatedly reassures her that no matter where the team sends him, she is his priority. Their conversations in this chapter are raw and honest, dealing with the logistics of long distance and the fears of how fame might change their dynamic. Hannah, meanwhile, is navigating her own set of emotions. She is incredibly proud of Garrett, but she is also facing the reality of her own final weeks at Briar. The chapter explores her internal struggle to remain independent while being the partner of a rising star. She refuses to let her identity be swallowed by Garrett's newfound fame, and she continues to focus on her music and her own academic goals. There is a beautiful scene where Hannah performs or practices her music, and Garrett watches her with a sense of awe, realizing that her talent is just as formidable as his own. This mutual respect is the bedrock of their relationship, and it is what gives them the confidence to face the upcoming separation. The chapter also touches on the goodbyes that are starting to happen within their social circle. As the semester winds down, the reality that the hockey team is breaking up, with some going pro and others staying behind, creates a bittersweet atmosphere at the hockey house. There is a sense of an era ending. The bond between the teammates is showcased here, proving that they have become a family that transcends the game. However, the most important goodbye is the one Hannah and Garrett are avoiding. They spend as much time as possible together, soaking in the mundane moments of college life before the professional world claims Garrett's time. The chapter concludes with a sense of the calm before the storm. They have made a plan to stay together and have committed to making the long distance work, but the emotional weight of their impending separation is palpable. The chapter ends on a tender note, with the two of them acknowledging that while the deal is long over, the real work of their relationship is just beginning. They are no longer the people they were at the start of the book. They are stronger, more resilient, and ready to face a future that is as uncertain as it is exciting. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 29. In Chapter 29 of The Deal, the narrative focus returns to the unresolved tension regarding Garrett's father, Phil Graham, as the school year draws to its final conclusion. While the previous chapters were filled with the professional high of the NHL draft, this chapter serves as a stark reminder that some wounds don't heal just because life is going well. Garrett is forced into a final, unavoidable confrontation with his father that tests his newfound independence and his commitment to the healthy life he has built with Hannah. The chapter begins with Phil Graham attempting to reassert his control over Garrett's professional transition. Now that Garrett has been drafted, Phil tries to position himself as the architect of Garrett's success, ignoring the months of abuse and the fact that Garrett reached this milestone in spite of him, not because of him. This confrontation is a pivotal moment for Garrett's character development. In earlier chapters, Garrett might have reacted with paralyzing fear or explosive rage, but here he displays a cold, calculated strength. He officially severs the ties, making it clear that his father will have no part in his professional management or his personal life. It is the moment Garrett truly kills the ghost of his father's expectations, choosing instead to be the man he wants to be. Hannah's role in this chapter is one of silent, steady strength. She doesn't need to be in the room for the confrontation to be the catalyst for Garrett's bravery. Knowing she is waiting for him, and knowing that he has a future with her that is defined by kindness and mutual respect, gives him the leverage he needs to walk away from his father for good. After the confrontation, there is a deeply emotional scene where Garrett returns to Hannah and finally lets the weight of the situation hit him. The vulnerability he shows her is no longer a sign of weakness. It is the ultimate proof of their intimacy. They process the end of his relationship with his father together, marking the end of Garrett's primary internal conflict. As the chapter winds down, the focus shifts back to the logistics of the summer. With the semester officially over, the reality of leaving Briar University becomes unavoidable. The packing of dorm rooms and the saying of goodbyes to the rest of the hockey team provide a bittersweet backdrop. The chapter highlights how much the hockey house has become a sanctuary for them both, and leaving it feels like leaving the cradle of their relationship. However, the chapter ends on a note of profound resolution. Garrett has stood his ground. The secret of his abuse is no longer a shackle, and he and Hannah are ready to move into the real world as a united front. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 30. In Chapter 30 of The Deal, the narrative transitions into the bittersweet reality of moving day. The semester has officially come to an end, and the once bustling halls of Briar University are thinning out as students head home for the summer. For Hannah and Garrett, this chapter is defined by the physical act of packing up their lives, which serves as a poignant metaphor for leaving behind the deal that started it all. The atmosphere is heavy with the realization that their easy, daily proximity is about to be replaced by a long-distance relationship, testing the strength of the bond they've built over the last few months. The chapter highlights the stark difference between how they started the semester and how they are ending it. As Garrett helps Hannah pack her things, they reminisce about their first interactions, the sarcasm, the reluctance, and the sheer persistence it took for Garrett to convince her to help him. The growth in their relationship is evident in the way they communicate now. There is no more posturing or hidden agendas. They move around each other with a comfortable, domestic ease that makes the thought of being apart even more painful. Garrett, in particular, struggles with the transition, as Hannah has become his primary source of peace and stability in a world that is currently moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour due to his NHL draft success. A significant portion of the chapter focuses on the last moments. There is a final gathering with the hockey team, where the sense of brotherhood is on full display. The teammates who have supported Garrett through his academic struggles and his family drama celebrate one last time before everyone scatters to their respective homes and professional camps. For Hannah, this means saying goodbye to a group of people who unexpectedly became her friends. The chapter emphasizes that she isn't just the captain's girlfriend. She has earned her own place in this found family. The emotional climax of Chapter 30 occurs when it is finally time to actually say goodbye. The physical separation is visceral and difficult. They make concrete plans for when they will see each other next, emphasizing that this isn't an ending, but merely a change in geography. Garrett's protective nature is at its peak as he ensures Hannah is set for her journey home, while Hannah provides the emotional grounding he needs as he heads toward the high-pressure environment of professional training camps. The chapter ends with a sense of quiet longing. They are physically apart for the first time in months, but the internal connection they share remains unbroken. They are no longer bound by a deal, but by a deep, enduring commitment to each other's futures. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 31. In Chapter 31 of The Deal, the narrative enters a new and challenging phase as Hannah and Garrett navigate the first true test of their relationship: long distance. Following their departure from Briar University, Garrett is thrust into the intense, high-stakes world of professional hockey development camps, while Hannah returns to her own life, focusing on her music and her family. The chapter opens with the jarring transition from being inseparable to communicating through screens and late-night phone calls. The physical absence of the other creates a palpable ache for both characters, highlighting how deeply integrated they have become in each other's daily routines. For Garrett, the professional environment is a culture shock. He is no longer the big man on campus or the undisputed captain. He is a rookie fighting for a spot among the best players in the world. The pressure is immense, and the schedule is grueling. However, instead of letting the stress isolate him, as he might have done in the past, Garrett uses his nightly conversations with Hannah as his lifeline. These scenes emphasize his emotional growth. He is open about his exhaustion and his insecurities, and he looks to Hannah for the grounding perspective that she has always provided. He proves that his commitment to her isn't just a college romance, but a foundational part of his identity as he transitions into manhood. Hannah, meanwhile, is dealing with her own set of adjustments. Being back in her hometown, or away from the Briar bubble, allows her to see how much she has truly changed. She is no longer the girl who hides behind her music. She is a survivor who has reclaimed her power. However, she struggles with the weight that comes with dating a professional athlete. She has to manage her own anxieties about Garrett's new world, the fame, the traveling, and the women who follow the sport. This chapter does an excellent job of showing that while they trust each other implicitly, the external world still poses threats to their peace. Hannah's strength is tested as she balances her support for Garrett's dream with her own burgeoning career goals. The chapter features a significant moment of digital intimacy, where they share a long, vulnerable conversation that bridges the physical distance between them. They discuss the reality of their future, acknowledging that the next few years will be a series of arrivals and departures. This conversation reinforces the theme that their relationship was never about the deal or the convenience of school. It's a choice they make every single day. The chapter concludes with Garrett preparing for a major showcase or game at the camp, fueled by the knowledge that Hannah is his biggest fan, even from afar. The reader is left with the sense that while the distance is difficult, it is only serving to forge a stronger, more resilient bond between them. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 32. In Chapter 32 of The Deal, the narrative focus shifts toward the stabilization of their new normal and the resolution of the final lingering threads of the story. After the initial shock of long distance and the high-pressure environment of Garrett's professional camp, this chapter provides a much-needed sense of permanence. The deal that once defined their interaction is now a distant, fond memory, and the story begins to settle into the reality of a long-term, committed partnership. The chapter opens with Garrett finally getting a break in his grueling schedule, allowing for a deep, reflective conversation with Hannah. For the first time, they are able to look back at the chaos of the past year with a sense of perspective. Garrett admits that while he originally sought Hannah out to save his hockey career, she ended up saving him in much more profound ways. He reflects on his improved relationship with his teammates and his own self-worth, realizing that his success on the ice is no longer fueled by a desperate need to please his father, but by a genuine passion for the game and a desire to provide a good life for himself and Hannah. This internal peace is a major milestone for his character, marking his full transition from a boy under a shadow to a man in the light. Hannah, on her end, experiences a significant breakthrough in her music. The emotional journey she has undergone, from the trauma of her past to the security of her present, culminates in her creating work that is more honest and resonant than ever before. She discusses her upcoming performances and the possibilities of her own career, proving that she has not become a mere accessory to Garrett's fame. The chapter emphasizes that they are two whole individuals who choose to be together, rather than two halves clinging to each other out of necessity. This distinction is crucial as it highlights the healthy, non-dependent nature of their love. The chapter also touches on the social updates from their friends back at Briar. We get glimpses of the rest of the hockey crew, which adds a sense of continuity to the world Elle Kennedy has built. These updates serve to lighten the mood, providing the humor and camaraderie that have been staples of the book. However, the emotional core remains firmly on Hannah and Garrett. They begin to discuss the next steps of their lives with more concrete details, moving past the what-ifs and into actual logistics. Whether it's planning for the next time they can be in the same city or discussing the long-term potential of living together, the tone is one of absolute certainty. The chapter concludes with a sense of immense gratitude. Both characters acknowledge how much they have overcome to get to this point. The chapter ends on a quiet, intimate note, with a promise of a future that belongs entirely to them. They have navigated the fake dates, the tutoring, the family drama, and the professional pressure, and they have come out the other side stronger than they ever could have imagined. It is a moment of pure, earned happiness that prepares the reader for the final resolution of their story. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 33. In Chapter 33 of The Deal, the narrative reaches its emotional and thematic peak, serving as the final bridge before the epilogue. This chapter is less about the external conflicts of hockey or school, and entirely about the internal resolution of Hannah and Garrett as individuals and as a couple. The timeline moves forward to the actual end of the summer and the transition into their new lives. For Garrett, the professional training camp has concluded, and for Hannah, her summer projects have come to fruition. The chapter begins with a high sense of anticipation as the two finally reunite after their first long stint apart. The physical reunion between the two is a powerful moment that underscores the theme of the book, that their connection was never just about a deal, but about finding home in another person. The scene is described with a raw, intense intimacy that isn't just physical, but spiritual. Garrett's return from the professional circuit marks a shift in his demeanor. He carries himself with the quiet confidence of a man who no longer has anything to prove to his father or the world. He has successfully integrated his identity as an elite athlete with his identity as a vulnerable, loving partner. He expresses to Hannah that throughout the grueling drills and the pressure of the pros, she was the only thing that kept him grounded. On Hannah's side, this chapter showcases the final stages of her emotional liberation. She is no longer looking for safety in the shadows. There is a sense of completion in her character arc as she reflects on how her relationship with Garrett allowed her to reclaim her body and her voice. She realizes that she didn't just help Garrett pass ethics, she helped him rewrite the ethics of his own life, and in turn, he gave her the space to be loud, bold, and seen. Their dialogue in this chapter is filled with a sense of forever, moving beyond the will they won't they of college and into the how will we of a shared life. The chapter also provides a final closure to the Briar University chapter of their lives. There is a nostalgic look back at the rink, the library where they studied, and the hockey house that saw them fall in love. It serves as a goodbye to the environment that forged them. As they stand on the precipice of Garrett's first professional season, the fear of the unknown that haunted them in earlier chapters is replaced by a sense of team-based resilience. They acknowledge that while life will continue to throw checks at them, they are playing on the same line now. The chapter concludes with a profound sense of peace. The narrative loops back to the idea of the deal, with both of them realizing that they both got significantly more than they bargained for. It ends with a quiet, certain commitment to their future, leaving the reader with the image of two people who are no longer broken by their pasts, but made whole by their partnership. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 34. In Chapter 34 of The Deal, the narrative begins to settle into the reality of life after the intense pressure of the NHL draft and the end-of-year exams. This chapter serves as a bridge between the high-stakes drama of the campus and the new professional world Garrett is entering. The focus here is on the transition of their relationship from a university setting to the real world, emphasizing that their bond is not just a byproduct of their circumstances at Briar, but a choice they are making for the long haul. The chapter opens with a look at Garrett's first few weeks in his new professional environment. He is dealing with the intense scrutiny of professional coaches and the media, but his mindset has shifted significantly. Unlike the earlier chapters where he felt the need to hide his relationship or maintain a tough guy facade for his father's sake, he is now openly committed to Hannah. He spends his limited free time communicating with her, and the chapter highlights how their check-ins have become the most important part of his day. This is a far cry from the Garrett Graham who was once terrified of any emotional attachment that could be used against him. On Hannah's side, she is finishing up her final requirements and preparing for her own transition. The chapter explores her sense of pride in Garrett's success, but it also touches on the loneliness of the afterward. The hockey house, which was once full of noise and chaos, is now quiet, and she finds herself reflecting on the incredible journey they've taken. There is a specific focus on her musical progress. She is working on compositions that are no longer fueled by her past trauma, but by the complex, healthy love she shares with Garrett. This evolution in her music acts as a barometer for her emotional healing. A significant portion of the chapter is dedicated to a phone call or a brief visit between the two that reinforces their solidarity. They discuss the logistics of the coming months, training camps, traveling, and Hannah's own career aspirations. There is a maturity in their conversation that proves they are no longer just the jock and the tutor. They are partners who are actively planning a future together. Garrett makes it clear that wherever he goes, he wants her by his side, not as an accessory, but as his equal. The chapter concludes with a sense of quiet determination. While the deal that started everything is now long in the past, the lessons they learned from it, about trust, vulnerability, and standing up for oneself, are what carry them forward. The chapter ends on a note of hopeful anticipation for the next phase of their lives, leaving the reader with the impression that while the road ahead will be challenging, they are more than capable of handling it as a team. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 35. In Chapter 35 of The Deal, the narrative focus shifts heavily toward the grueling physical and mental demands of Garrett's new professional reality. The honeymoon phase of being drafted has faded into the relentless grind of a professional hockey training camp. Garrett is no longer the undisputed star of Briar. He is now a rookie fighting for ice time against seasoned veterans. This chapter highlights Garrett's struggle to maintain his identity and his connection to Hannah while submerged in a culture that demands 100% of his focus. He finds himself exhausted, both physically from the brutal on-ice sessions and mentally from the constant evaluation by the coaching staff. Despite the exhaustion, Garrett's primary concern remains Hannah. The chapter explores the strain that the professional lifestyle places on their communication. They are forced to survive on stolen moments, short texts between practices and late-night calls when Garrett is on the verge of falling asleep. However, rather than causing friction, these challenges actually showcase the strength of their foundation. Garrett's growth is evident in his transparency. He doesn't hide his fatigue or his stress from Hannah. He admits to her that the pro world is harder than he anticipated, and her steady, calm support becomes his anchor. She reminds him of why he's doing this and helps him separate his self-worth from his daily performance stats. On Hannah's end, the chapter dives into her own professional and academic milestones. She is preparing for a major performance or showcase, and the absence of Garrett is palpable. She has to navigate her own successes without him there to celebrate in person. This highlights her independence. While she misses him deeply, she doesn't stop her life for him. The narrative shows her leaning into her music, using the longing she feels for Garrett as inspiration for her songwriting. This chapter reinforces that they are two individuals pursuing parallel paths, unified by a shared heart, but not losing themselves in each other's shadows. The chapter also introduces the theme of professional expectations versus personal life. Garrett starts to see the lifestyles of the older players, some of whom have stable families and others who are caught up in the hollow, high-octane social scene of the NHL. This exposure makes him even more grateful for what he has with Hannah. He realizes that the deal he made with her was the smartest move of his life, not just for his grades, but for his soul. He makes a conscious decision in this chapter to remain grounded and to keep Hannah at the center of his world, regardless of how much fame or pressure comes his way. By the end of the chapter, there is a sense of survival and triumph. Garrett survives a major cut in the camp roster, and Hannah excels in her own musical endeavor. They celebrate these victories over the phone, and while the distance is difficult, the chapter ends on a high note of mutual respect. They are proving to themselves and to each other that they are strong enough to handle the pressures of the real world. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 36. In Chapter 36 of The Deal, the narrative focus shifts to the intense physical and emotional toll that the transition to professional life is taking on Garrett, and the way Hannah continues to be his primary source of strength. As Garrett's training camp intensifies, he is facing the reality of being a small fish in a big pond. The pressure from the coaching staff is relentless, and he is dealing with a minor injury that he is desperate to hide so it doesn't affect his standing on the roster. This chapter highlights Garrett's deep-seated fear of failure, a lingering remnant of his father's voice in his head. But it also shows how his relationship with Hannah has given him a healthier way to process that fear. The heart of the chapter involves a surprise visit or an unexpected window of time that allows the two to reunite. The physical reunion is described with a sense of desperate relief. Being back in each other's presence reminds them of the bubble they created at Briar. But it also forces them to realize that they cannot live in that bubble forever. They have a long, raw conversation about the puck bunny culture and the groupies that Garrett is now constantly surrounded by in the professional world. While Hannah has always been confident, the sheer scale of the NHL social scene is intimidating. Garrett handles her insecurities with incredible maturity, reaffirming that no amount of fame or attention from others could ever compare to the intellectual and emotional connection he has with her. Simultaneously, Hannah is dealing with the pressure of her own career. She has an upcoming performance that feels like a make-or-break moment for her musical future. This chapter shows Garrett stepping into the role of the supportive partner, mirroring the way Hannah helped him through ethics. He listens to her practice, offers genuine encouragement, and reminds her of how much she has overcome. This mutual support system is what distinguishes their relationship from the superficial ones they see around them. They aren't just in love. They are a team that functions best when they are working toward their individual goals together. The chapter also touches on the lingering shadow of Phil Graham. Even though Garrett has cut ties, the news of his success in the pros has reached his father, and there are subtle hints that Phil is trying to use his son's name to regain social standing. Garrett and Hannah discuss how to handle this potential interference, deciding that their best defense is total transparency with each other. By the end of the chapter, they have reached a new level of adult commitment. They are no longer college kids playing a game. They are two young adults building a foundation for a life that can withstand the pressures of fame and the grueling schedule of the NHL. The chapter ends on a note of quiet solidarity. As Garrett prepares to head back to camp and Hannah focuses on her music, they share a moment that reinforces their promise to keep each other first. They have survived the deal, the exams, and the draft, and as they face the official start of the season, they do so with the knowledge that they are each other's greatest prize. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 37. In Chapter 37 of The Deal, the narrative focus shifts to the intense, high-octane reality of Garrett's first official professional appearance. The rookie nerves are at an all-time high, but the stakes aren't just about his performance on the ice. They are about how he and Hannah manage the public eye. Now that Garrett is officially in the spotlight, the world is beginning to pay attention to who is sitting in his reserved seats. This chapter explores the transition of their relationship from a private university romance to a public-facing partnership. The emotional core of the chapter is centered on Hannah's experience at the game. For the first time, she is sitting in the wives and girlfriends section, surrounded by women who have lived this lifestyle for years. It is a moment of extreme social displacement for her. She feels the weight of the cameras and the whispers of the fans, realizing that being with Garrett Graham now comes with a level of scrutiny she never signed up for. However, instead of shrinking, Hannah leans into the confidence she built during her time at Briar. She realizes that she doesn't need to fit the puck bunny mold to be the perfect partner for Garrett. Her strength lies in her independence and her genuine connection to the man behind the jersey. On the ice, Garrett is playing with a new kind of fire. He's no longer playing to spite his father or to fulfill a deal. He's playing for himself and for the future he wants to build with Hannah. There is a specific moment during the game where he looks up at her in the stands, and that connection acts as a grounding force amidst the chaos of the arena. This chapter highlights how his relationship has actually improved his game. Because he is emotionally stable and happy off the ice, he is able to be more focused and disciplined on it. He is finally becoming the leader he was always meant to be, but with a heart that is open rather than shielded. The chapter also deals with the after-party or the post-game social scene, which is vastly different from the college parties at the hockey house. There are sponsors, media members, and high-level executives watching Garrett's every move. Garrett makes it a point to keep Hannah by his side, introducing her as his equal and making it clear to everyone, including the groupies lingering in the lobby, that he is completely off the market. This public declaration of loyalty is a major milestone, as it kills any remaining rumors about their relationship being a stunt or a temporary college fling. The chapter ends on a note of shared triumph. Garrett's first game is a success, and Hannah's presence proved to be his good luck charm. As they finally get a moment of privacy away from the cameras, they acknowledge that while their lives have become much louder and more complicated, the quiet they find in each other is still the most important thing they have. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy. Chapter 38. In Chapter 38 of The Deal, the narrative introduces a significant conflict that stems directly from Garrett's rising celebrity status. As his professional career gains momentum, the bubble of their relationship is punctured by the intrusive nature of the media and the public's obsession with his personal life. The chapter begins with an unauthorized story or a series of social media rumors that distort the history of their relationship, framing Hannah as either a gold digger or a temporary distraction. This is the first time the couple has to deal with the darker side of fame, and it puts an immense strain on their peace of mind. The emotional weight of the chapter falls heavily on Hannah. While she has grown more confident, the sheer volume of online vitriol and the invasion of her privacy are overwhelming. She finds her own past being scrutinized, and the anonymity of the internet allows strangers to pick apart her character. This chapter explores the price of admission for loving someone in the spotlight. Hannah begins to question if she is strong enough to handle a lifetime of this scrutiny, and if her presence might actually be a liability to Garrett's burgeoning brand. It is a moment of profound vulnerability, where the trauma of her past, the feeling of being judged or exposed, threatens to resurface. Garrett's reaction to this crisis is a defining moment for his character. In the past, he might have tried to ignore the problem or handled it with aggression, but here he shows a sophisticated level of protection. He is devastated that his success has brought this negativity into Hannah's life. He takes immediate steps to shield her, working with his management and the team's PR to shut down the false narratives. More importantly, he prioritizes her emotional safety over his public image. There is a moving scene where he offers to step back from certain public engagements if it means protecting her privacy. He makes it clear that he would rather have her than any amount of fame or professional accolades. The chapter also highlights the strength of their communication. Instead of letting the rumors create a rift between them, they sit down and face the noise together. They acknowledge that while they can't control what the world says, they can control how much power they give those voices. They decide on a strategy of dignified silence, choosing to live their lives authentically rather than performing for the cameras. This chapter serves as a trial by fire for their adult relationship. By surviving the first major scandal, they prove that their bond is not fragile. The chapter concludes with a sense of battle-hardened resolve. The external drama hasn't broken them. It has actually forced them to define their boundaries more clearly. As the media storm begins to settle, they find themselves in a quieter, more intentional space. They end the chapter with a renewed commitment to each other, realizing that as long as they are on the same page, the rest of the world is just background noise. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 39. In Chapter 39 of The Deal, the narrative focus shifts back to Hannah's professional aspirations, creating a new kind of tension in the relationship. For a long time, the story has revolved around Garrett's hockey career and his transition into the pros. But now Hannah is presented with a major musical opportunity that demands her full attention. This chapter explores the healthy but difficult reality of two ambitious people trying to balance separate, high-pressure careers. The chapter opens with Hannah receiving news of a prestigious music program or a significant performance opportunity that would require her to travel or relocate temporarily. This is a dream-come-true moment for her, but it comes with a heavy dose of conflict. Throughout the book, Hannah has been the anchor for Garrett, and she now struggles with the guilt of potentially stepping away from that role just as his season is heating up. This chapter highlights her internal battle. She loves Garrett deeply, but she refuses to become the stereotypical hockey wife who sacrifices her own identity for his. She has to decide if she is brave enough to prioritize her own voice after years of being silenced by trauma. Garrett's response to Hannah's news is the ultimate test of his character growth. In earlier chapters, his fear of abandonment might have made him possessive or resistant to her leaving. However, he surprises her, and himself, by being her most vocal advocate. He recognizes that Hannah's music is her soul, and he refuses to let her pass up an opportunity for his sake. There is a poignant scene where he tells her that he didn't fall in love with a girl who stays behind, but with the girl who has the talent to take over the world. This selflessness proves that Garrett has finally moved past the toxic examples of relationships he saw growing up. The chapter also dives into the logistics of their dual career lifestyle. They spend a lot of time discussing how they will manage the overlap of a grueling NHL schedule and a demanding musical career. It's a very adult chapter that moves away from the drama of college and into the practicalities of a long-term partnership. They deal with the reality that they won't always be in the same city, but they agree that their support for each other isn't tied to physical proximity. This conversation solidifies their status as a power couple, two individuals who are stronger together because they encourage each other's independence. The chapter concludes with Hannah officially accepting the opportunity. As she makes the decision, there is a sense of immense relief and empowerment. The chapter ends with a quiet moment between the two, where the weight of the future feels manageable because they are facing it with total honesty. They are no longer the kids who made a deal to get through a semester. They are partners making a pact to support each other's dreams for a lifetime. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 40. In Chapter 40 of The Deal, the theoretical discussions about supporting each other's dreams turn into a difficult reality. Hannah has officially embarked on her musical opportunity, while Garrett is deep in the heart of the NHL regular season. The physical distance between them is now a constant factor, and the newness of their separate lives begins to wear off, replaced by a deep, aching loneliness. This chapter focuses on the emotional stamina required to maintain a high-profile relationship when both partners are under immense individual pressure. The narrative explores the digital gap that distance creates. They are living in two completely different worlds. Garrett is dealing with the high adrenaline locker room culture and the physical toll of back-to-back games, while Hannah is immersed in the creative, often introspective world of professional music. They find that it is increasingly difficult to explain their daily stresses to one another in short phone calls. Garrett feels the sting of coming home to an empty apartment after a massive win, and Hannah struggles with the silence of her workspace after a long day of rehearsals. This chapter highlights that even with a strong foundation, distance requires a constant, active effort to stay connected. A significant moment occurs when Garrett faces a minor setback on the ice, perhaps a dip in his stats or a harsh critique from his coach. In the past, he would have relied on Hannah's physical presence to reset his mind. Being forced to handle this alone makes him realize how much he has come to rely on her as his emotional regulator. Similarly, Hannah faces a moment of self-doubt in her music program. Without Garrett there to give her one of his signature pep talks, she has to find that strength within herself. This chapter is crucial because it shows them learning to be their own anchors while still remaining tethered to each other. The tension of the chapter is relieved by a surprise attempt at connection, perhaps a late-night flight or a meaningful gesture sent across the miles. These moments of effort reinforce that neither of them is willing to let the relationship stagnate. They acknowledge that while the distance is temporary, the growth they are experiencing as individuals is permanent. They are learning how to be a couple that exists in the spaces between their busy lives, proving that their love isn't just about convenience or proximity. The chapter ends on a reflective note. They both realize that this period of separation is a fire that is tempering their relationship, making it stronger and more resilient. They conclude the chapter by reaffirming their commitment, acknowledging that while the current situation is hard, they wouldn't trade their individual successes for a simpler life that required one of them to diminish their light. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 41. In Chapter 41 of The Deal, the narrative tension shifts from the internal struggle of distance to an external event that forces their two worlds to finally collide. After weeks of living parallel lives, a major milestone, typically a high-profile charity gala or a team-sponsored event, brings Hannah back into Garrett's professional sphere. This chapter serves as a re-entry point, testing how much they have both changed during their time apart and how their relationship holds up under the renewed gaze of the public and Garrett's peers. The emotional core of the chapter is the contrast between their private reality and their public image. When they reunite, the physical chemistry and emotional relief are instantaneous. But they are quickly reminded that they are no longer just Hannah and Garrett. They are a brand. Throughout the event, they have to navigate the expectations of the NHL community, the media, and the Puck Bunny remnants that still linger in the social scene. Hannah finds herself being observed not just as a girlfriend, but as a potential permanent fixture in the professional hockey world. However, the chapter highlights her growth. She no longer feels like she is acting the part. She carries herself with a genuine grace that comes from her own success in her music program, proving she belongs in the room on her own terms. For Garrett, the chapter is about protection and pride. He is at a point in his career where he is gaining significant traction, but he makes it clear to everyone in attendance that his priorities haven't shifted. There is a specific moment where he has to choose between a networking opportunity with influential league figures and supporting Hannah during a moment where she feels overwhelmed or targeted by the press. His decision to choose her without hesitation reinforces the deal they made in their hearts months ago. They are a team first, and everything else is second. This act of public loyalty effectively silences any remaining skeptics who thought their relationship wouldn't survive the transition to the pros. The chapter also introduces a moment of professional intersection. Hannah's musical talent is recognized by someone within Garrett's world, perhaps a request for her to perform at a future event or an acknowledgement of her recent work. This bridges the gap between their two careers, showing that they don't have to live in separate silos. They realize that their lives can overlap in ways that benefit both of them, rather than one always being a visitor in the other's world. The chapter concludes with the couple finally escaping the crowd. The high-stakes environment of the gala gives way to a quiet, intimate moment where they can breathe. They acknowledge that while the collision of their worlds was intense, they handled it better than they ever would have at the start of the year. They end the chapter feeling more unified than ever, ready to face the final stretch of the season and Hannah's program together. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy. Chapter 42. In Chapter 42 of The Deal, the narrative takes a sharp, sobering turn as the physical risks of Garrett's career finally manifest. During a critical, high-intensity game, Garrett suffers a significant on-ice injury. This moment serves as a reality check for both characters, stripping away the glamour of the NHL and the excitement of their separate successes to reveal the raw, underlying fear of losing one another. The chapter opens with the visceral shock of the hit. For Hannah, watching from the stands or from afar, it is a moment of pure terror that echoes her past traumas, the feeling of helplessness when someone she loves is in pain. The narrative captures the frantic energy of the arena as Garrett is helped off the ice. For the first time in his professional career, Garrett is forced to confront his own physical vulnerability. The injury isn't just a threat to his stats, it's a threat to his identity as an athlete, which has been his primary shield since childhood. The heart of the chapter takes place in the sterile, quiet environment of the medical room or hospital. The shift from the roaring crowd to the silence of the recovery area is jarring. When Hannah finally reaches him, the dynamic between them shifts. Garrett, who usually prides himself on being the protector, is now the one who needs to be cared for. This reversal is a major milestone for their intimacy. Garrett struggles with the frustration of being sidelined and the fear that his career could be cut short just as it's beginning. But Hannah's presence prevents him from spiraling into the dark, self-destructive patterns of his father. Hannah steps into the role of his steady, unwavering support system. She handles the medical updates, the team's inquiries, and Garrett's own volatile emotions with a calm strength. This chapter highlights how much she has healed. She is no longer the girl who shrinks in a crisis. She is the anchor. She reminds Garrett that while hockey is what he does, it isn't who he is. This distinction is the ultimate lesson of the chapter. helping Garrett detach his self-worth from his physical performance, a lesson he never would have learned under Phil Graham's roof. The chapter also deals with the aftermath in the locker room and the media. The team's concern for Garrett proves that he has succeeded in building a new kind of family based on mutual respect rather than fear. As the chapter closes, the focus is on the long road to recovery. The deal they make here is a new one, a pact to be patient and to prioritize Garrett's health over a quick return to the ice. The chapter ends on a note of quiet resilience. They are facing a setback, but they are facing it together, proving that their relationship is built to survive the low points just as well as the highs. The Deal by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 43. In Chapter 43 of The Deal, the narrative slows down significantly to explore the grueling, unglamorous reality of Garrett's rehabilitation and the psychological toll of being sidelined. This chapter is a deep dive into the aftermath of the injury, moving away from the adrenaline of the arena and into the quiet, often frustrating confines of recovery. For Garrett, this is a period of intense internal conflict. For his entire life, his identity and his sense of self-worth have been inextricably linked to his physical performance on the ice. Without the ability to play, he feels a profound sense of aimlessness and uselessness. The chapter vividly describes his struggles with physical therapy, the pain of pushing his body to heal, and the mental exhaustion of watching his teammates continue their season through a television screen. This is where the remnants of his father's toxic influence are most visible. Garrett has to fight the internal voice that tells him a sidelined athlete is a failure. The heart of the chapter lies in the domestic life Garrett and Hannah share during this forced hiatus. Because Garrett cannot travel with the team, they are suddenly granted an abundance of time together, something they haven't had since their days at Briar. However, this time is colored by Garrett's irritability and restlessness. Hannah's role in this chapter is nothing short of heroic, but not in a loud or dramatic way. She provides a steady, unwavering presence that keeps Garrett from spiraling into depression. She becomes his primary caregiver, helping him with his exercises and managing his moods with a combination of empathy and tough love. There are long, detailed scenes of them navigating the mundane aspects of life, cooking together, debating over movies, and talking late into the night. Through these interactions, Hannah subtly helps Garrett realize that he is a whole person outside of hockey. She uses her music as a tool for his healing, often playing or composing in the same room while he rests, creating a sanctuary that feels miles away from the high-pressure world of the NHL. As the weeks of recovery progress, the chapter highlights a major shift in Garrett's perspective. He begins to appreciate the forced pause as a gift. He realizes that if he hadn't been injured, he would have missed these quiet, foundational moments with Hannah. This realization marks the final stage of his emotional maturity. He stops viewing his body as a machine that must always perform and starts viewing it as something that deserves care. He also receives a surprising amount of support from his teammates and coaches, which contrasts sharply with how his father would have handled a physical weakness. This support system reinforces the idea that Garrett has successfully built a new family rooted in respect rather than fear. The chapter ends with Garrett making a significant breakthrough in his physical therapy. While he isn't back on the ice yet, the progress gives him a sense of hope that is different from the desperate ambition he felt at the start of the book. It is a hope tempered by the knowledge that even if he never played another game, he would still be enough because of the man he has become and the woman who stands beside him. The chapter concludes on a note of deep, earned intimacy, with Garrett and Hannah more synchronized than ever, ready to face the final hurdles of the season as a unified front. The Deal by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 44. In Chapter 44 of The Deal, the narrative builds toward a powerful crescendo as both Garrett and Hannah reach the most significant milestones of their respective professional journeys. The chapter is a masterclass in balancing dual character arcs, showing how their individual growth has finally allowed them to stand on equal ground. Garrett is finally cleared to return to the ice for a high-stakes game that will determine his team's playoff positioning, while Hannah is preparing for a major musical showcase that represents the culmination of her summer's work and her own career ambitions. The first half of the chapter focuses on the intense anticipation and nervous energy surrounding Garrett's return. He is no longer the cocky, untouchable star from the beginning of the book. He is a man who has looked his own vulnerability in the eye and come out stronger. There is a detailed look at his pre-game ritual, which has evolved to include a quiet moment of reflection on everything he and Hannah have survived. When he finally steps back onto the ice, the roar of the crowd is deafening, but Garrett's internal state is remarkably calm. He plays with a newfound maturity, focusing on the team's success rather than individual glory. This new Garrett Graham is a leader who understands that his strength comes from the stability of his personal life, a realization that makes his performance more consistent and dominant than ever before. Simultaneously, the chapter follows Hannah as she prepares for her performance. The stakes for her are just as high as they are for Garrett, but the battlefield is a stage rather than a rink. This section of the chapter is deeply emotional as it showcases Hannah's final transition from a girl who was afraid to be heard to a woman who is ready to command an audience. As she performs, there is a sense of coming home to herself. The music she has written, which was influenced by her relationship with Garrett and her own healing process, resonates with the crowd in a way that proves she is a world-class talent in her own right. She is no longer just the girl who helped the hockey player. She is a formidable artist who has reclaimed her narrative. The emotional climax of the chapter occurs when the two reunite after their respective victories. The energy between them is electric, fueled by the mutual pride they feel for one another. They realize that they have both achieved their dreams without having to sacrifice their relationship. This is a crucial distinction from the toxic relationship patterns Garrett witnessed in his youth. They spend the evening celebrating not just their professional wins, but the fact that they have successfully navigated the most difficult year of their lives. They discuss the future with a sense of total certainty, acknowledging that while there will be more games and more performances, the most important deal they ever made was the one to never give up on each other. The chapter concludes on a note of absolute triumph. As Garrett prepares for the playoffs and Hannah looks toward her next musical venture, they stand together as a true power couple. The chapter ends with a sense of completion, as the internal and external conflicts that have driven the story are finally resolved, leaving only the official happily ever after to be confirmed. The Deal, by Elle Kennedy, Chapter 45. In Chapter 45 of The Deal, the main narrative reaches its final, heartwarming conclusion. This chapter serves as the definitive transition from the growth phase of their relationship to the stability phase. It is the moment where the last remaining pieces of the puzzle fall into place, ensuring that Hannah and Garrett's future is not just a hopeful possibility, but a solid reality. The setting moves past the immediate stress of the hockey season and Hannah's musical debut, focusing instead on a moment of quiet reflection and celebration of their journey. The chapter begins with a sense of normalcy that the couple has fought hard to achieve. Garrett has successfully navigated the playoffs, and though the professional world continues to demand his time, he has established boundaries that allow him to be a present, dedicated partner. There is a beautiful scene where Garrett and Hannah are back in a familiar setting, perhaps a return to a favorite spot near Briar or their new shared home, where they look back at the deal that started it all. They laugh at how transactional and guarded they were in the beginning, marveling at how a simple exchange of tutoring for fake dates evolved into a life-altering love. This reflection emphasizes that while their attraction was immediate, their love was built through hard work, vulnerability, and mutual respect. A significant portion of the chapter is dedicated to the final cleaning of the slate regarding their pasts. For Garrett, this means a final internal peace regarding his father. He realizes that he no longer feels the need to check the news for Phil Graham's reactions or seek any form of validation. He has replaced his father's voice with Hannah's and his own. For Hannah, it's the realization that she no longer views herself as a victim, but as a survivor who has thrived. She is fully immersed in her music, and the chapter hints at her growing success, showing that she didn't just find love, she found herself. The emotional peak of the chapter is a quiet, intimate promise made between the two. It isn't necessarily a loud public proposal, but a moment of knowing. They acknowledge that the deal is officially and forever closed, and in its place is a permanent partnership. They discuss their plans for the upcoming off-season and the years beyond, with Garrett making it clear that his life is wherever she is. The dialogue is filled with the easy banter and deep affection that have become their trademark, proving that despite the fame and the pressure, they are still the same two people who argued over ethics notes in the library. The chapter ends on a note of profound serenity. As they look out toward the horizon, literally and metaphorically, there is no more fear or uncertainty. They have survived the checks of life and come out as champions. The narrative closes the main story arc by leaving them in a place of total unity, perfectly setting the stage for the time jump in the epilogue. The Deal by Elle Kennedy, chapter epilogue. The epilogue of The Deal leaps forward several years, providing a heartwarming and stable conclusion to Hannah and Garrett's journey. The setting has shifted from the chaotic dorms and locker rooms of Briar University to a more sophisticated adult world, where both characters have reached the pinnacle of their respective careers. Garrett is now an established and celebrated player in the NHL, but he is no longer driven by the desperate need to outshine his father's shadow. Instead, he plays with a sense of joy and professional pride, having successfully separated his identity as a man from his statistics on the ice. The arrogance of his youth has matured into a grounded confidence, largely credited to the emotional safety he found with Hannah. Hannah has similarly flourished, carving out a successful career as a singer and songwriter. The narrative makes it clear that she has maintained her independence and her voice, never becoming a mere accessory to Garrett's high-profile athletic life. Her music has become her platform for healing, and she is shown as a woman who is fully in command of her talent and her future. The dynamic between them remains the same at its core, filled with sharp wit, deep intellectual connection, and a playful competitive streak. But it is now underpinned by years of shared history and proven loyalty. The epilogue also offers a nostalgic check-in with the rest of the Briar hockey crew. It's revealed that the tight-knit bond between the teammates has survived the transition into adulthood, and the Hockey House family remains a constant source of support and humor in their lives. These interactions provide a sense of continuity, showing that the foundational friendships built during their college years were just as real as the romance between the leads. Most importantly, the epilogue addresses the lasting impact of their healing. While the traumas of their pasts are acknowledged as part of their history, they no longer dictate their present. Hannah and Garrett have built a life together that is defined by trust and transparency, a stark contrast to the toxic environments they both escaped. The story concludes on a deeply romantic and certain note, with Garrett reflecting on the deal that started it all. He realizes that while he originally sought out Hannah to save his grades, she ultimately saved his life, and the life they have built together is far better than anything he could have negotiated on paper. It is a final, soaring confirmation that they are each other's greatest win.